Hey guys, welcome to part 10 of What If Naruto Became Serious During Chunin Exam. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 34. Challenge. Yamanaka Ino was staring at her friends as she watched Hanata down another bowl of ramen in a record-breaking 1 minute and 30 seconds. Beside her, Sakura was calming her down, all the while Tenten was finding the whole thing amusing. Every time I take my eyes off him, I always worry about other girls trying to pounce on him like he's some kind of wounded prey. Hanata mumbled while Sakura was laughing nervously at her friend's statement. Well, Naruto is a bit of a meddling busybody when it comes to problems of other people, he just can't help but involve himself. It doesn't help that he doesn't notice when girls make an advance towards him and he just lets it happen, unfortunately. And that's the problem. Hanata shouted, seething in rage as Ayame gave a nod and handed the Hyuga heiress another freshly cooked bowl of ramen. Naruto-kun is too nice for his own good. I know that's one of his best traits, but I wish those other women would leave him alone and back off. Tenten leaned over to Ino and whispered to her, I've never seen Hanata this upset before. It's almost like seeing a totally different person. Ino raised a finger knowingly and pointed out, Hanata has all these pent-up frustrations in her life, and her moments of solace, especially around Naruto, are always going to be what she thinks is part of her territory alone, and as such, seeing or knowing women other than her, noticing her boyfriend, is a sure sign that can change her attitude. Don't know what she sees in that idiot, though. Tenten shrugged. Hanata sharply turned her gaze towards Tenten and showed a photo of Naruto being kissed by none other than the famous Fujika's Yukie, now known as Kazuhana Koyuki. Whoa, Fujika's Yukie. The actress. What in the world happened? Ino suddenly grabbed the photo and read the note that was at the bottom. It was certainly a bit scandalous with how the actress was propositioning their friend. Sakura was laughing nervously again at that. Well, our last mission was about protecting and safeguarding her, and Sakura began her tale. She recounted the many times Naruto had unintentionally made Koyuki an admirer from the ship, right up until the very end. Hanata, who had now just heard of the story thanks in no part of Naruto shivering like a cold dog in a river, scowled even further. Ino had a hand on her cheek as she leaned on the counter. She had to admit, Naruto was pretty bold and daring with his talks and the way he treats Koyuki. It's almost as if she was envisioning some sort of gallant warrior who was serving the princess. Wow, who knew Naruto could be so romantic? Inadvertently, at that, he can beat Sasuke-kun in that department, at least. Hanata turned her gaze at Ino and leaked a sliver of killing intent, you stay away from my Naruto. Ino shivered a little, as if she saw an angry and uncontrollable lioness behind Hanata. Relax Hanata, Naruto's not my type. But you have to admit, most women fall for that kind of boy. Tenten followed suit, trying to placate her teammate's cousin. She knew the Hyuga to be strict and disciplinarian, but Hanata was different. Why yeah, most of us don't fall for that kind of stuff. Hell, I'm not even impressed by that. I'm not some dainty flower that needs protecting myself. So you're saying he's not good enough for you? Hanata asked. The two girls had a bead of sweat at the back of their heads. Hanata is growing to be quite the pain. The two thought to themselves as Sakura was the one to mediate matters now. Maybe we should just find another place to vent. Talking about that kind of stuff here is. Sakura looked a bit shifty at that as she glanced to her side, seeing more and more people entering the shop, and it was Naruto's male peers were among the crowd about to go inside. With a sigh, Hanata left a fistful of Ryo at the counter and never looked back, in a rush to the hot springs and never giving a glance back. We should try the hot springs. That'll cheer you up. Ino shouted as she went and caught up with Hanata along with the others. Back at the ramen shop, Naruto, Kiba, Sasuke and Shikamaru were about to enter and they saw Ayame looking at the blonde pitifully. Naruto just sighed and went to his seat to plop down on with his head on the table. I take it you heard what happened? Naruto asked the Ayame and gave a wordless nod. As much as I can from Sakura. Though I can't blame you for what happened. Ayame said this as the four sat down with Kiba and Shikamaru looking confused as to what the two were talking about. Can we get any details as to what is taking place? And is this why Naruto is treating us for company? Shikamaru asked and Ayame spoke like a canary. She even brought out a photo of the blonde that the girls apparently and conveniently forgot in their hurry to have Hanata let off some steam. Kiba was shaking in fury. You little bastard. It's not enough that you are getting attention, but from a smoking hot actress too. Kiba was wringing Naruto by the neck, who was struggling to let go of Kiba's grip just because he didn't feel like putting an effort in it for now. Sasuke, uncharacteristic of him, tried to de-escalate the situation. Calm down, horn dog. Naruto didn't mean it to happen. I saw it with my own two eyes. A girl could flash herself on the idiot and he still wouldn't know if he was being hit on or not. Naruto gave him the finger. Nice try, idiot, but I don't swing that way. This time it was Shikamaru's turn to smirk and added, yeah, Naruto, didn't you know? Sakura spent at least 2 weeks at Sasuke's place with just the two of them. Naruto, now free from Kiba's grasp, turned to his teammate and asked, wait, you and Sakura spent 2 weeks with each other and no one else? Sasuke raised an eyebrow at this. Yeah, what's it to you? Naruto looked thoughtful for a moment and said, well, did anything happen during that? From what Ero Sennin told me, if something like that happened they usually do the thing, you know. What thing? Sasuke asked. The people around the room all looked at Sasuke as if he was growing a second head. Now it was Naruto who was looking a bit worried and had an arm around Kiba while mumbling. Is he seriously telling us that he didn't make any moves on Sakura during that time? Naruto asked, and Kiba was nodding at the blonde, growing a bit concerned that Sasuke was at the age where something might happen and didn't know about it. Kiba looked up for a moment and began processing what Naruto was implying and said, now that I think about it, Sasuke is as dull as a rock when it comes to these matters. He's as wound up as a shamisen string. He hasn't even noticed that Tamaki's been visiting him for the past month or so. Who's Tamaki? Naruto asked. What's this about my cousin? Sasuke asked. Kiba was quick on the draw. Nothing you should be concerned about, Sasuke. Say, aren't our orders up? Food's about to get cold. No way was Kiba going to tell Sasuke about him hanging out with Tamaki. Shikamaru had a raised eyebrow at the two and then remarked, you two are awfully acting suspicious right now. The two brash ninja merely played it off and said something along the lines of doubting Sasuke's thoughts and matters concerning the opposite sex. Naruto made a mental note to ask Sakura about Sasuke and their relationship for later. Right now, there were other important matters that needed addressing. Such as the hot, steaming, delicious ramen in front of him. Oh sweet, sweet ramen. Come to Papa, only to be interrupted when he was about to put the noodles in his mouth. I've finally found you, Naruto-sama. Sasuke looked at the source of the voice only to find a girl about their age, a heart-shaped face and long straight black hair tied to a ponytail. She certainly had the looks of a stunning girl, prim and proper if her kimono was anything to go by. But something told him that underneath all of that reserved nature, something like a hungry beast was lurking within. He turned to his teammate beside him only to find the seat empty, a bowl of ramen untouched at the table and a fat stack of ryo by the side of the bowl complete with change to weigh the paper down. The other two were looking at the seat as well, with Kiba turning to the source of the voice. If he was a little jealous earlier, that jealousy was spiking now. He's getting away. Takiwa, let's chase after him. He's gotten a lot faster since we met him. The girl pointed to the rooftops as the others turned to look at where the girl was pointing, seeing Naruto jump from rooftop to rooftop and running as if the hounds of hell were chasing after him like his life depended on it. Shikamaru looked amused and somewhat confused. Who was this girl that was about to give chase to the blonde? What the hell is happening? So this is the person who Naruto said was targeting him from Nadeshiko village. Can't say I'm surprised. Shikamaru was looking at Sasuke, who was watching the two women jump to the rooftops to give chase. Targeting him. For the longest time, Shikamaru had never seen Sasuke smile. It turns out he can give a sadistic one as well, and Shikamaru was a little perturbed by this. It's a village of women only. Apparently his master pawned him off from a challenge and he was forced to commit under oath. The women there challenge a man they are targeting as prospective husbands. Shikamaru was a little shaken up at that. A village filled with women. An entire village filled with strong and apparently relentless women that would take no for an answer. A village of women like his mother. Suddenly, the urge to hide in his home was so great that he had left behind a roll of ryo at the counter, conveniently forgetting the fact that Naruto was paying for them, and began walking away. Briskly. Tsuki let Ayame scoop up the money on the counter and began to count the excessive bills left behind by the Nara heir. The old man sighed as he said, I wish kids these days would value money as much we do. I mean, we're getting rich by all the money left behind here. But those kids. Ayame rolled her eyes at his father at this and began counting the bills. That's what you're concerned about. At this rate, I'll be secured for life. Tsuki merely laughed at his daughter's statement and went back to cooking. With business booming as it is, he wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. I suddenly lost my appetite after this whole mess. I'm going to find that blonde bastard and tell me his secrets. Kiba looked fired up and Ayame had to let the boy go. Oh, go ahead, be my guest. With the amount of money your friends left behind, I'm sure we can take this much of a loss. The father and daughter then looked at Sasuke, who sat back down at his seat and began eating his ramen. It was wasteful to leave a meal untouched. Konoha training grounds. Shino Aburame was practicing his taijutsu along with Fu when they were interrupted with Naruto, who had clumsily fell down from the treetops and landing on the ground face first. The blonde looked panicky for a second and looked back before he calmed down. He had a huge lead against his pursuers. It was time to hide and let this all blow over until he can safely return to his apartment. Damn you, Ero Sennin. Naruto cursed his master for all the rotten luck that he was placed into. Naruto, is there something the matter? Shino asked as he helped the blonde up and dusted himself off. Naruto looked a bit shifty for a moment and said, yeah, nothing too serious. Just some stuff being forced on me and me just wanting nothing to do with it. I just need a place to hide. So you're the Naruto guy that Shino keeps telling me about. Fu interrupted as she went forward and circled around the blonde, who was looking at her curiously. Ah, you must be Shino's girlfriend I've been hearing about. Fu is not my girlfriend. Oh, yes I am. Fu refuted that statement in lightspeed as she saw Shino being silent for a second. A heavy sigh escapes from the boy as he once again tried to explain social norms to the girl. Fu, that is not how he describes what's not true about it. I am a girl, and your friend. Fu then continued with a huge smile on her face, you know what that means, right? Girlfriend. Naruto noticed that Fu was not going to budge around on this topic, seeing her looking so proud and thumping her chest, so he quickly just dropped it. Can't argue with that kind of logic, Shino. The blonde resorted to teasing. Shino noticed the sly smile escaping from the blonde looked just like how Kiba expressed himself when his teammate kept teasing him with that. These topics are of utmost importance to Fu-san if she were to. Naruto-sama. Naruto panicked and shrieked to unbelievable levels in his vocal cords. Even ghosts weren't this scary. They weren't supposed to catch up to him this quick. Gotta go, Shino and Fubi. Naruto was soon out of sight with Fu looking at the blonde and grinning from ear to ear. I like your friend Shino, he's funny. Shino adjusted his glasses and replied, there's going to be more of that here from now on. The village is always lively with him around. Naruto-sama, please accept my challenge. If I win, then be my husband. Fu laughed heartily at Shino's friend. If she were being honest, she liked being in Konoha more than in Taki nowadays. The shinobi force treated her like one of them, and the camaraderie was something to behold here. She had never seen that in her stay with Taki, and although there were fewer people that she interacted there, they meant more to her in her stay there than what she had currently. Shino may be her only link to this village, but she supposed that would change in time, and she was open to the idea that she would be part of Konoha in the future. A community that accepted her for what she was. Back on the streets of Konoha and near the shopping district, Naruto had landed and looked back and then around him to see any sign of Shizuka and her attendant. None so far, he thought, and gave out a sigh of relief again as he began walking in a brisk pace. He couldn't let down his guard for 1 second, or else he'd be bound and gagged literally and figuratively. Naruto Nichin. Naruto stopped his walk for a moment and saw Konohamaru and his team along with Hanabi, who were running up to him. Konohamaru. Doing some shopping? Naruto asked, pointing to the paper bag in his arms and a rucksack behind him. Yeah, I was buying some stuff for training and then some tools when we saw you. We were actually about to go to the training grounds for some sparring. Would you like to supervise? Konohamaru was looking at the blonde with expectations, and the blonde looked like he was sweating bullets. Konohamaru and his team had heard of Naruto's promotion to Chunin, and he was really expecting his senior to make some time for him. But Naruto looked like he was seeing ghosts. That or something was hovering over his shoulder. I'm really sorry, Konohamaru. I'm caught in something right now, maybe next time. He asked that with a hint of panic in his voice. This went unnoticed by Hanabi. Oni-sama, is there something wrong? Hanabi asked, and Naruto froze for a moment and answered, nope. Nothing's wrong. Everything is just peachy. Naruto's panicky posture gave him away. Hanabi thought that their senior didn't just want them involved. Since when did you call Naruto ni, Oni-sama? Konohamaru asked. Hanabi answered, since he and Oni-sama were officially an item. As if that was the most common answer that she could think of. Oh, Hanata-ne-chan. Come to think of it, I just saw her going to the hot springs. She looked quite annoyed. Konohamaru then turned to Naruto and said with a frown, you didn't do anything stupid, did you, Ni-chan? Hanabi seemed to scoff at it. Naruto ni-sama is the most virtuous person I know that is worthy of ne-sama's attention. Surely, you jest, Konohamaru. Konohamaru was looking quite unconvinced at that, as did Moegi and Udon. After all, Naruto was the one who taught them the Orochi no Jutsu. Hanabi, on the other hand, found it ridiculous. Naruto was the person that assured her in the past to trust the judgment of her sister, and he wasn't wrong then. She realized that Naruto's intuition and charisma was something to marvel at. People follow him. Those with strength acknowledge him. To be recognized by one of the Sannin and show prowess in Fuinjutsu was nothing to sneeze at. Just then, something clicked within Naruto as if an epiphany had hit him. That's right. That's a great idea. Good work, kids. After this is over, I am definitely going to hang out with you guys to see your progress. Need to go now. Bye. Naruto then took off faster than anyone could say yellow flash. Konohamaru and Hanabi looked confused. Udon remarked, well, he's in a hurry. Must be something serious. Moegi gave a nod. Well, he is a Chunin and he's currently spearheading the Fuinjutsu teams. I'm surprised he's even giving us the time of the day. As they began to walk to the training grounds, two women crossed paths with them. One looked like a fully matured woman and the other was a girl that looked about the age of Naruto and his peers. Pardon me, she started. Konohamaru looked at the girl. She looked as pretty as the many women she saw in the village. Perhaps prettier than some of them. She looked quite sophisticated just from her attire alone, and Konohamaru's peers looked fascinated with her as well. Have you seen a boy? Blue eyes and spiky blonde hair. She then postures as she approximates the person in question's height. Quote. About this tall and wearing a fancy-looking haori. Ah, Naruto ni-chan. Konohamaru asked, which seemed to pique the interest of the three other genin with him. Oh, you know Naruto-sama. Sama, the quartet thought. To address Naruto with such an honorific that he was held at such a high esteem was rare. Was she a fan? Yes, he usually likes to hang out at Ichiraku Ramen. But he just went past the marketplace earlier. I think he's heading to the hot spring district. I can't be sure. He was in a rush earlier, so I don't know if he's really there or not. Konohamaru answered truthfully. Who was this pretty girl that is following Naruto? Could she have something to do with why Naruto was twitchy earlier? Hanabi, just behind Konohamaru, was looking at the girl with suspicion. And sure enough, she dared to ask the girl a question that nobody else in her group would. Why are you looking for Ni-sama? The girl looked at the Hyuga before her and answered as demurely as she can. I was tasked in finding him and giving him a challenge as per tradition in my village. I must see to it that I meet him in person. Hanabi remained suspicious, but she let it slide for now. Like Konohamaru said, Ni-sama is heading to the hot springs. Whether he is there or not, I doubt you'll be able to reach him on both scenarios. Shizuka kept her composure and covered her mouth with the sleeves of her kimono. That wouldn't do. But I thank you nonetheless. She turned her sights to her attendant. Takiwa, let's head to the hot springs. I'm sure he'll be hiding in the male side of the bath. We'll be waiting by the entrance. Understood. This sounds serious. Konohamaru thought he was about to give chase when he was stopped by Hanabi. What's the matter? He asked. Hanabi looked on with a frown as she stared at the back of the two women and replied, you mean you couldn't tell? She wasn't surprised. Konohamaru wasn't able to read much on body language as she did. But the girl's posture told her of one thing. Her body was tense, I could tell even with her kimono on. That grip on her umbrella was telling me that she's excited about something. Like she's itching for a fight. Moegi was surprised at this. You can tell from just looking at her, Hanabi-chan. Hanabi nodded. She's going to fight, Naruto ni? Udon asked, already noticing signs of something ugly appearing before them. And she's pretty restrained on it too. Almost as subtle as a Chunin. Hanabi added. Konohamaru then stopped at Hanabi's remarks. Should we tell him? Hanabi shook her head. Ni-sama can handle her. That or Ne-sama will. Either way, she's not going to stop and we'll only be obstacles if we try to confront her. Hot springs. Hanata and her peers had just gotten out the hot springs refreshed and relaxed and now wearing yukatas. Hanata was now less upset than she was at first and she was glad that she managed to work things out with Sakura, Tenten and Ino. She did not even feel any hint of jealousy at all. That was because working through with their conversations, Hanata had concluded that Naruto, despite his tendency to help people and women in particular, only meant well and that he had no other ulterior motives than to help. His personality was just that he didn't want people to suffer. He wanted to see them thrive, rise above their pain just like he did. And that Naruto was so nice that he always empathizes with those around him. He was still the sweet, caring and loving boy that Hanata fell in love with ever since they were children. Not that she didn't have problems with the opposite sex either. There were boys and men asking for a chance to his father to court her and she turned them down quickly, always. It didn't matter to her, they were not Naruto. But it was still annoying that the amount of attention that Naruto was getting kept growing by the day. I know you're there, Naruto-sama. You can't keep hiding from me. You'll see that I can be quite persistent when I have to be. Hanata stopped dead in her tracks. As if glass was shattered to tiny, unrecognizable pieces. She looked at the source of the voice just waiting outside the male's side of the bath and saw some of the men awkwardly walking away as a beautiful woman stood by the entrance and waiting for Naruto inside. Was Naruto here? That would be a problem. Thinking that it was an emergency, Hanata activated her Byakugan and saw Naruto inside the open-air baths looking like a scared wounded animal. He was quivering in the baths with his half of his face submerged in the water. He was also naked. A trickle of blood escapes from Hanata's nose. She quickly wiped it off and deactivated her dujutsu. Excuse me, miss, can you please wait outside? You are bothering the others and it is making everyone uneasy. Hanata replied with a courteous smile, putting up a front to be civil. The girl looked at her for a second and then smiled demurely at her as well. Sakura looked a little nervous here while Ino and Tenten were ready to jump out the door and make a run for the hills. I'm sorry for causing such a disturbance but I must wait here so that the person in question doesn't escape from my challenge. Hanata then remembers the story Naruto shared to her about the girl from Nadeshiko village. So this was Shizuka, the raised ideal Yamato Nadeshiko that Naruto had described that was persistent as a gnat. This lady was harassing her Naruto to fulfill his part of the promise that his master had stupidly arranged him in. A sigh escapes Hanata's lips as she held her head. Another trouble that Naruto found himself in with no fault of his own. He was just a magnet for this. Be that as it may, Shizuka-san, you are disturbing the peace here. We can take this outside and wait for this person like civilized people. Hanata inwardly cursed at this slip-up. She did not intend for this girl to find out that she knew him. Shizuka kept her smile as Tenten, Ino and Sakura took a cautious step back. The girl from another village replied, Era, I do believe I haven't given my name to you. Could you be Naruto-sama's girlfriend? Shizuka could tell that Hanata was a noble. The white eyes, the long flowing purple hair and the poise and dignity of those who were of noble birth. Much like she was. Only that Hanata came from one of the oldest clans in the entire world, the Hyuga clan. Hanata felt superior for the first time. A smile, a genuine one, escapes her lips and replied, Era, has he told you about me? Her hand makes its way to her cheeks and blushed, I'm flattered. Really? Naruto-kun is such a sweet boy. This seemed to hit something as Shizuka's smile changed a little with Hanata noticing a twitch and replied, Yes, he has told me of this wonderful person that he says he can't live without. Era, don't tell me you're bragging about that. Era, surely, you jest. Jealousy is quite unbecoming, no. Lightning flashed between the two and behind them were the visage of two hungry and angry lionesses that were facing each other as if fighting over a meal. The trio behind Hanata had a bead of sweat behind their heads as they all thought, you were pretty jealous earlier, though. They really needed to defuse the situation before something might happen and this goes south in more ways than one. Inside the male's side of the bath, Naruto was there shivering like a cold dog in winter as he hugged his knees with a dead look in his eye. Hey man, you're that Naruto guy, right? Why don't you just go out there and tell her off already? She's being a bother here. Naruto looked around. There was no one in sight. He told himself that he was hallucinating and said, it's not like she's going to stop. She's here to collect on that stupid promise. It was then that a person emerges from the water. No wait, a person formed from the water. It was a man from what Naruto could tell, and that man had light blue to almost white hair forming, and he showed his sharp pearly whites at him. Naruto almost screamed at the top of his lungs just when he thought he was seeing a ghost. The boy in front of him laughed a little as he went to opposite side of the baths. Ah well, what can you do? Maybe my teammate can help you out, the name's Suigetsu by the way. The boy then shouted to the other side. Hey Karen, help us over here, would ya? Some lady outside's been blocking the entrance here and I really need to get out soon. Karen, the hell are you bothering me, Suigetsu? I'm here to relax, damn it. Don't just ask me to go outside and yell at that stupid bitch. The sound of the voice was familiar. Naruto was sure of it. Karen, is that you? It's me, Naruto. Help out a family member, will ya? Naruto, since when did you get back? About a few weeks ago. It's been a busy schedule, didn't have much time to go around the village and relax. I swear I was going to come by and check you guys over, but I got a mission as soon as I got home. Please, you got to help me. Naruto hears Karen's sighs on the other side and replied, fine. But you owe me for this, cousin. Naruto cheered, thanks, cousin. Suigetsu looked surprised, wow, that bitch is your cousin. From the looks of it, you two are worlds apart. She's been such a horrible person to me since we became teammates. Really? She's never been that much of a difficult person. Maybe you've been pushing the wrong buttons on her. Naruto asked. He definitely didn't know much about his estranged cousin. Only that she was just as much tortured as the rest of Orochimaru's experiments. Suigetsu shrugged. Maybe. I just tease her as any friend should and she wallops me hard with that punch of hers. Good thing I can turn to water or I might have been mush months ago. Huh, I guess family is more alike than I thought it would be. Outside, Karen walked out of her side of the baths and adjusted her glasses, staring out at the two women who were just about to maim each other limb from limb. Good thing she made it a point to wear her yukata as well before heading out. Yo, lady that keeps screaming towards the men's baths. Get the fuck outta here and stop bothering my cousin. He's not interested, ya hear me? The five women were now staring at her like she grew another head. Naruto has a cousin. As if reading their minds, Karen replied, what? Naruto's my cousin. I'm Uzumaki Karen, and that boy inside you're bothering is an Uzumaki through and through. Oh thank goodness you're not one of those obsessive fangirls. Ino sighed in relief as she went to Karen, as did Sakura and Tenten. Sakura wanted to hit Ino with a bat, though. From what she could recall, Ino was a fangirl too, just that she was fangirling over Sasuke. Excuse me. Sakura answered for her. Your cousin has been having problems as of late. Tenten nodded. Right, he's being fought over by those two over there. It's like a bloodbath is going to happen any second now. Karen didn't look like she was disappointed at this, in fact she looked proud at it. She knew Naruto's personality, and aside from that and his near roguish good looks, there certainly were people who would find his cousin interesting and intriguing. Of course he is. He's my cousin. Any girl worth their chops would immediately notice his charm. Karen then adjusted his glasses once more and told Hanata and Shizuka, if you're going to throw hands, then do it in the training ground. Now stop bothering him. With that, Karen went inside and slammed the door shut behind her. Shizuka, now a little miffed that Naruto was denying her any audience, decided to agree with what his cousin said. You actually believe that woman is Naruto's cousin? Tenten asked. Sakura nodded. There's a particular trait among Uzumaki that they have red hair, about as bright as like flowing blood. The distinction of that genetic trait has been passed down from generation to generation. And only some do not display that inherent trait, just like Naruto. Though judging from her way of speaking and attitude, the apple doesn't fall from the tree. Sounds like a lot of bull, but I'll believe you, for now. Ino replied, and Sakura began to think further into this. Maybe his other parent has a strong genetic predisposition. I mean, Blonde hair and blue eyes are a rarity in this part of the world. The only blonde person other than Tsunade who had to have Naruto's hair color was a Yamanaka, and she was pretty sure that if Naruto was a Yamanaka, Ino would have known. Despite their current knowledge, that could mean. Sakura stopped thinking. There was a strong implication of a trace she had to look over. She didn't want to think about it for now, or she would immediately go into shock in utter disbelief. Ino, however, was much less reserved on the fact. No blonde person existed outside of the clan in Konoha with so few exceptions. First was Tsunade Senju, the other was. Ino shook her head. That was impossible, there was just no way. She forsook blabbing to Sakura just so the one called Shizuka wouldn't get any more ideas for Naruto's pedigree. Once they were outside, an unassuming Yumino Iruka was happily walking outside while Sakura, Ino and Tenten greeted the man who was nodding and humming to himself until chains began wrapping around his body in midair. Gah! The not-so-familiar voice of Iruka grunted as he was suddenly pushed down on the ground with his just you dispelling, revealing Naruto, who was panicking by the second. Shizuka praised her attendant. Great work, Takiwa. I knew you would see through to Naruto-sama's deception. Takiwa answered flatly. Spying on the male's side of the baths is nothing compared to fulfilling my duties, Shizuka-sama. Did you just peep on my side of the baths? I feel violated all of a sudden. All the females except for Takiwa and Shizuka were feeling Naruto's pain with a nod. Naruto said, and a gag ball was placed on his mouth. Naruto let out a scream despite of the contraption in between his lips, struggling and writhing like a fish out of water. A sudden burst of killing intent escaped around them as Hanata's figure was suddenly surrounded in flames. Shizuka turned to look and a chill went up her spine. You dare peep on my Naruto-kun in his vulnerable state. A small red bird then appeared in a cloud of smoke on Hanata's shoulders. Hanata was grinding her teeth out in contained rage and righteous fury. Not only that, you hogtied him as if he was an animal about to be consumed. The red bird looked at Hanata with concern and unease, but it could feel that Hanata's anger was focused on something else. Shizuka could feel her danger senses working on overdrive as she, not wanting to back down, replied haughtily to the Hyuga. A true Nadeshiko must take all advantages that she can. That includes all the tools necessary for a future husband. If you wish to be a proper wife, then you must have a will of pure steel and get the man you love. You want a will of pure steel. Hanata began to walk menacingly towards the two shinobi from Nadeshiko. All around Konoha, shinobi began converging towards the hot springs. Mighty and accomplished Chunin like Neji and Sasuke landed on the establishment's rooftops, followed by Kurenai and Asuma, who were dumbfounded at the scene before them. Holy shit, it feels like a rabid animal has gotten loose. I could feel it way over the intelligence department. Anko shouted as she saw the Hyuga heiress making her way to two unfamiliar and most likely foreign dignitaries. Two likely dead dignitaries if Hanata could help it. Anko on her part, scrambled all the way from the intelligence bureau and made her way here when she felt that huge spike of killing intent. She thought it was something terribly serious, until she saw Naruto tied up in chains, a ball gag in his mouth and a blindfold on his eyes. She proceeded to laugh her ass off at the scene. Meanwhile, Naruto was still struggling, being hogtied, gagged and now blindfolded. Hanata. A worried Kurenai trailed. She had never seen sweet little Hanata act this way before. It was like a switch was flipped. What on earth is going on? A finger gently lays on Hanata's forehead. Hanata, for a moment, stopped in her blind rage and saw the Godime herself standing in front of her. The Hokage herself now had a hand on the Hyuga's head and calmed down. Are you fine now, Hanata? Hanata stared at Tsunade and nodded with an awestruck look on her face. Good. I don't know what happened, but I suddenly felt a large spike in killing intent a few seconds earlier. Lo and behold, I stumbled upon you and were the one unleashing that much. It speaks volumes of what made you so angry. Tsunade then turns her vision towards the two foreign shinobi and said, I don't appreciate the fact that you are tying up one of my most powerful Chunin and village asset. I can overlook this incident and never mention of this again, or I will come over there and make paste out of you too. The choice is yours, Kunoichi of Nadeshiko village. Shizuka looked at the woman in front of her. Long beautiful blonde hair in pigtails and a beautiful face to accompany the bombshell figure she had. There was no question, this was Senju Tsunade, the Godime Hokage of Konoha. She had commanded Takiwa to release the blonde from his bindings, and Takiwa, knowing she was no match for the Hokage, had released Naruto. Naruto, upon seeing Tsunade and Hanata, scrambles towards to them and hid behind the Hokage. All the while Hanata kneels beside Naruto to assure him. I am Shizuka, apprentice of the head of the village of Nadeshiko. I am obligated by right of my village to issue a challenge to Uzumaki Naruto to become my husband. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at this and then palmed her face. She knew this was coming sooner or later because of Jiraiya's warning. Unfortunately, Jiraiya was out of the village for now and she couldn't punch him. She would have to wait. She'll be making a carving of the stone monument using Jiraiya as a chisel once he gets back. Look, I don't have a damn clue about your traditions, but Uzumaki Naruto is an asset to this village. He can't be traded nor will he be used as a bargaining chip to pressure foreign dignitaries. As Hokage, I will not budge on this. If you want him, then come and claim him. Tsunade then looked at Shizuka, who was surprised at Tsunade's disposition, and then turned to look at Hanata, who was the same and felt a little betrayed, but Tsunade was nothing but calculating from this point on. But he stays here. He will not be coming with anyone, anywhere to a place where we don't have jurisdiction. As Naruto is an important part of our forces and also one of the lead researchers of the Fuinjutsu team, he is an integral part of the systems that run this village. But that doesn't mean that I am taking away his right to choose. If he so wills it, he will accept your challenge. But you will leave him alone if he chooses not to. By this, Tsunade once again turned to Hanata and subtly gave her a wink. The rest of the shinobi had their eyes widened as they all stared at Naruto. Hanata got the hint fast. She stood up beside Naruto and declared with steel in her voice and fire in her spirit. If Shizuka of Nadeshiko challenges Uzumaki Naruto for a duel, I will be taking his place. By clan laws, we are free to choose our spouse, and anyone who seeks his hand in marriage must settle this dispute amongst ourselves. And settle it we shall. Tomorrow at dawn, I will be the one to accept Naruto's challenge and you will be facing me as the Hyuga clan's representative. Tsunade gave a smile and a nod. She then turned to the two kunoichi from Nadeshiko village and said, You heard her. First thing tomorrow at dawn. Make sure you prepare yourself, Shizuka. I am sure the Hyuga heiress will be coming at you with fangs bared. The two kunoichi nodded and Shizuka said to Takiwa, Let us find ourselves a place for the night. Takiwa, I must prepare myself for tomorrow. She then turned her gaze back to Hanata and then to Naruto. Naruto-sama, you know as well as I do that I am not one to give up. With that, she unfolded her umbrella and swirled it around before she and Takiwa began to walk away from the bathhouses and onto an inn. I'm sorry, Hanata, you had to get caught up in my messes. Naruto said this as he gave a sigh of relief for a moment as he got up and readjusted his haori. Tsunade shook her head. Technically, your stupid sensei is the one to blame. Honestly, that man is just a manchild most of the time. A huge perverted manchild, but Tsunade digresses. Hanata, with a clearer head this time, offers her hand to Naruto and said, Naruto-kun, I know it's not your fault. I am upset, but not at you. I can never be upset at what you always do for other people. You are a beacon for them, you willingly guide them and you accept them without scorn or prejudice. That is your nature, and that nature is why I am with you now. So don't blame yourself for being you. I am happy that you are you, Naruto-kun, I will never change that about you. Naruto merely scratched the back of his head and blushed a little as Tsunade looked on with a smile of her own. Thanks, Hanata. Naruto grabbed Hanata's hand and she pulled him close and into her arms for an embrace. Hanata, don't. Hanata commanded the blonde and Naruto stopped talking. He remained silent for a moment and then Hanata spoke first. Don't talk for a moment. Please stay like this for a while. I need your warmth for now. This is all the encouragement that I need. Ino, Sakura, Tenten and surprisingly Karen were silently cheering from the background and commanding Naruto to return the hug to Hanata. They are just too sweet sometimes. Kiba interjected beside his female peers. All of them kept staring at the Inuzuka who looked like he was about to ruin this special moment for them. Karen's teammate, now sitting alongside Kiba added, Man, I was hoping for a throwdown earlier. I have to wait for tomorrow for that. Lame. This earned a glare from the female group. Naruto simply returned the hug, and Hinata's smile grew as she tightened her embrace. I'll win tomorrow, Naruto-kun. I'll win and set you free from this challenge. And then you'll be mine. Naruto looked down on Hanata in his arms and smiled. Win or lose Hanata, I'll never trade you for anyone else. That's never going to happen. Naruto then had an idea. Well, there's still daylight, why don't we go to the training grounds and train some? Hanata smiled at Naruto and nodded. Yes, let's. Hanata then added, and Naruto-kun. Yeah, don't tell me about Shizuka's fighting style, I intend to win with my full power, on my own. You sure? Naruto was confused by this. Didn't Hanata want an advantage? He could literally tell everything now and Naruto was sure that she could beat Shizuka with no problems. Trust me, Naruto-kun. Naruto shrugged at this. Alright, if that's what you want. With that, the pair headed up to the training grounds. Naruto and Hanata went to the training grounds and did a light spar, more focused on taijutsu than anything else. Naruto had noticed that Hanata had made significant strides in her taijutsu as she now used the momentum of her opponents against them. The flow of Hanata's hand-to-hand was much different from Neji's where he performed with more direct and accurate strikes. Hanata performed her Juken with better fluidity and less rigid than what Naruto had come to know of the Juken. Hanata's strikes were meant to be as fluid as possible, more in conjunction with her footwork and a lot less about delivering direct blows. Certainly, she wasn't faster than Neji, but Hanata had a more subdued but seriously fatal approach if she were to use her version of Juken for actual combat. She always angled her limbs and feet to drive blows away from her and with that approach, expose a weak point that Hanata could exploit. Naruto had noted that Hanata's Juken was more calculated than Neji's that figuratively bludgeons the opponent to death while Hanata stabs them. Hanata had dubbed her version of the Juken as the Juaho, gentle step, and it honestly brought forth a taijutsu form that was fundamentally every bit as effective as the Juken. Naruto was impressed and then told Hanata of what he had been working on since his return. I'll show you, Hanata. Naruto sat down and assumed a lotus position. Hanata watched in fascination as she saw Naruto's chakra flared and began building up. It took the blonde 2 minutes to gather and mix this energy from him. It looked like he was gathering some unknown energy to his chakra coils and then saw Naruto's eyelids turn to orange pigments and his deep blue eyes now were yellow with his pupils turned to bars like a toad's. Hanata saw his chakra flare to larger portions of itself, circulating all around his body and bursting forth from every tenketsu point that she could see. To the naked eye, Naruto did not display much, other than the changes in Naruto's eyes but the chakra was emanating around him. Hanata watched as Naruto landed a blow to a rock that shattered it to dust. Hanata saw the chakra behave according to Naruto's will and witnessed how his chakra grew in potency and augmented Naruto's hand before he pulverized the large rock into nothing more than dust. This is Sage Mode. I've recently learned how to enter Sage Mode during my last months at Myobokuzen. But the flaw of this technique is that it takes me roughly 2 minutes to get into, which is a substantial flaw. In order for it to enter my system, I have to be still and gather as much natural energy as I can and mixing it with my own. It still isn't battle ready, but I hope within the next few months I can overcome that hurdle and maintain Sage Mode longer than its intended use. Hanata had never seen such a technique before. Not even in her wildest dreams. She could tell that Naruto's durability was increased, because not only was the chakra exuding power, it also formed as much as a protective skin for the user. She doubts that she could close Naruto's tenketsu points by conventional means. She doubts that even Neji or her father could do such a thing. Then, Hanata remembered something. Naruto-kun, your shadow clones transmit information back to you upon dispelling, am I right? Naruto nodded. Yeah, they transfer information back to me upon dispelling, that and a little bit of my chakra comes back to me. Why do you ask? Hanata then answered. Then that should solve your problem about entering this new mode, right? Naruto gave it a thought. Well, I guess you have a point there, but the waste of chakra would be an issue, though I do have a lot of chakra, it doesn't mean that it's efficient. Hanata then recalls another event in which Naruto had given her a tag before her trial against Byako. Why not a seal? You've given me one before, remember? She asked and Naruto stared at Hanata with a dumbfounded expression. A pause. Then Naruto starts cackling madly and exclaimed, of course. I tried doing 2 separate things when I should be doing this in the first place. Naruto slapped his forehead as if he had overlooked such an obvious answer to his problem. Naruto tried everything to improve upon using Sage Mode to make it viable in battle. Gathering as much as he could and then balancing it only made things more difficult. He had tried merging with the toads forcefully but found out that Kurama's chakra outright rejected them. He then tried to load natural energy into a paper seal but found it so cumbersome that he could only make 3 of them, and the seals petrified the piece of paper in his hands, and no matter what he did, no matter how much modifications he used, nothing seemed to work even with Jiraiya's help. He had foregone using shadow clones. Although by principle and practicality, they were his best shot, the chakra usage was wasteful even with his massive reserves, and Sage Mode ended up being shorter than what he would have liked. So Naruto had a plan now, and a seal design was already forming in his head. Hanata looked puzzled at Naruto's thought process currently, but she smiled nonetheless, seeing Naruto looking much more exuberant than earlier. She then approached Naruto and told him that they should get dinner together and sit down to talk what was going through Naruto's head. Naruto was all too happy to comply. Hanata had decided to go to a teppanyaki restaurant, who ushered them in, and the two found Shino and Fu enjoying themselves at one table with Anko, Karen, Suigetsu, and one Hanata didn't recognize as a large boy that was taller than Choji on another. Naruto had introduced her to the new team that was being led by Anko, and the 3 courteously greeted them, with Naruto vouching for Karen's statement as being a distant relative of his. Hanata seemed assured at Naruto's words that day about the red head. She thought that there was less competition involved, and it eased her mind for a bit. The next day, Hanata and Shizuka stood in front of each other at the training ground. Their peers were all present to see them from a distance, as the one to oversee their bout happened to be Hanata's father himself, Hiyashi. Behind the man was the presence of the Hyuga elders and her sister, Hanabi. Word had reached to the Hyuga clan of the challenge that Hanata accepted as proxy for the demon container, and the elders had taken notice of it. They had seen the progress of the heir apparent during their training, and from what they could gather from yesterday's events, they wanted to confirm just how much the eldest of Hiyashi's daughters had improved over the last few years. For years, they were disinterested in her as the future of the Hyuga clan. Hanata was weak in their eyes. She did not have the attitude nor the necessary ruthless nature that they were known for. To them, Hanata was a shrinking violet, a wallflower who did not seem like she would go far. But what happened since yesterday made them turn to look at the black sheep of the Hyuga clan in a more neutral light. Standing before her foe, Hanata went into the default Jukin stance. The elders were expecting something else, but if the heiress was resorting to the Jukin by default, then their interest had perked up. Hiyashi did not turn to look at the elders, for he knew that Hanata resorting to the Jukin would make them look without hesitation. He had known these dismissive men and women in his time as inattentive to the inner workings of the clan for years. He watched them ignore many of the problems that plagued the clan and maintain old and decrepit traditions that divided them for most of their history. Hiyashi couldn't help but hold a smirk on his face as he raised his hand, signaling the 2 combatants to prepare. Shizuka, seeing the man raise his hand up, had closed the umbrella covering her and held it by the side. This match will be no holds barred. The winner is decided when the loser yields or is knocked unconscious. Naruto looked on in a frown. He had noted that Shizuka seemed to have gained a bag of tricks of her own since facing him a year or so ago. He remembered how nimble she was when she faced him. Her skills were nothing to sneeze at, surely. But even he knew that facing a Hyuga at a taijutsu match was just asking for pain. The Jukin was infamous as a lethal and very effective taijutsu style. The familiarity of it spread across the nations, and its effects were known far and wide. In fact, it was so common that people rarely did not know of this style used by the Hyuga. Begin. And the match begun. Shizuka made the first move. She started her approach by going low and dashing towards Hanata at full speed. Hanata remained still, the veins around her eyes bulging, activating her Byakugan. She remained calm as Shizuka closed the distance within them in less than 3 seconds. Shizuka then performs a thrust with her umbrella, and Hanata simply redirected the flow of the umbrella away from her with a small glancing but chakra-enhanced parry with her palms, the accessory-turned weapon going past at her side, exposing Shizuka's weak point. Hanata then chose this opportunity to deliver a strike to the tenketsu on her shoulder. Shizuka, having good control of her own body, rolled with the parry and spun around as she unfurled her umbrella and used its open form as a shield against Hanata's strike. Hanata looked in surprise as she saw her fingers were flicked away when Shizuka deflected her strike. Naruto saw this and noted that Shizuka was much faster than she was before. It was probably why she had caught up to him yesterday more than what he had expected. But to see it in person gave him a worrying glance at Hanata. Hanata, Instead of stumbling, used the direction of the parry much like Shizuka and spun around with the aid of her footwork, and a small distance was gained between them. Hanata then decided it was best that she got rid of the umbrella. As Shizuka stood up, she twirled the umbrella on her shoulders, although with her dominant hand maintaining a firm yet gentle grip on its handle while her less dominant one hovered just below the base of the handle. Nadeshiko Ryu. A Megami no Odori, Nadeshiko style. Rain God's Dance. Just beside Naruto, Sasuke watched intently with his Sharingan, reading the moves used as they happened. He then mentioned to Naruto, "That woman from Nadeshiko has perfect body control. You only see that in good to expert taijutsu practitioners." Lee couldn't help but agree. "I must agree. Her movements are typical of a taijutsu practitioner. She knows when to loosen and tense up, and from the looks of it, she can do it on a majority of her own muscles. Such control can mean that she can match almost anyone in pure taijutsu alone." Sakura looked surprised at this. "Wait, so we're not just dealing with some fangirl here? As in we have a fangirl that actually knows her stuff?" Ino gave a knowing nod. "All too familiar with that feeling. Never underestimate a woman who has decided to sink her teeth onto something. They are relentless." Sakura gave a sly grin and said, "Takes one to know one, eh? I don't want to hear that from you, vice president of the Sasuke-kun fan club." Sakura promptly shut up. Hanata then was the one that took the offensive. She ran towards Shizuka, her palms at the ready, and stopped just in time for Shizuka to close her umbrella and swipe horizontally at her front, a hidden blade appearing up at the tip of the umbrella. Shizuka twirled, and as Hanata dodged and readjusted her bearings, spinning around and then halting Shizuka's momentum by sliding her foot forward, stopping the girl's spin. "It's like watching a dance rather than a fight," Choji commented, with the rest of his peers agreeing. They then saw Hanata parry the umbrella once more, with Shizuka deflecting a palm strike to the chest, narrowly escaping Hanata's strike. Shizuka had known of the Juken as a child. A taijutsu practitioner like her would know not to deliberately engage a Hyuga head-on, as the style was meant to disable with a single strike. It didn't matter if you could take a hit. A strike from a Hyuga meant certain doom. She jumped back and let a hail of kunai escape from her free hand. Hanata, with a simple lean to her right, the kunai had passed and missed her. She gritted her teeth as Hanata pursued her. Facing a Hyuga means to never get within their range. Do not try to block or let her get a hit in. Fighting a Hyuga meant that she had to be on her toes. Another palm strike, this time aimed at her shoulder. Shizuka managed to lean back just enough that Hanata couldn't reach her. A mistake. Hanata had observed that Shizuka was competent in hand-to-hand combat. Any ninja worth their salt would know that stalemates will eventually tip over to those that had the necessary thinking to step up. And step up she did. A moment of weakness was seen, and in a flash, Hanata struck with her right palm as it gathered air from her momentum. Hake Kusho. 8 trigrams air palm, condensed air then escaped a makeshift shell as a wave of air blasted from her palm and was sent towards Shizuka, nailing her on the shoulder. Shizuka stumbled back and rolled on the ground, making a small trench as she was sent hurtling back. Once she stopped, she looked at her kimono, torn from that attack alone, but her armor was still intact. She could feel some bruising on her left shoulder, but noted that she could still move it. Puzzled, she looked back at Hanata, who remained standing and motionless as she remained in her Juken stance. "I never imagined that the Hyuga could have such a trick up their sleeves," Shizuka mentioned, dusting herself off and then placing her umbrella on her right shoulder once more. The Kusho is a technique that was developed as a way for the Hyuga to have the necessary range to intercept enemies at a distance. Hanata let another one rip as a wave of compressed air surged ahead and onto Shizuka, who immediately opened her umbrella and placed it forward and twirled it as she dissipated the attack from the Hyuga. "You know, that umbrella of hers is made of pretty strong stuff. I did some digging about that girl's village, and let me tell you, that place is a goldmine for chakra-absorbent heavy metals." Tenten watched attentively as Shizuka made another advance, with Hanata meeting her head-on, attacking and counter-attacking, once again falling into a stalemate. Karen adjusted her glasses at this. "That would explain how durable that thing is. Probably weighs a ton." Suigetsu didn't seem too impressed by it, but is it as heavy as the Kubikiri Haucho? Karen looked puzzled at this. "Why the hell are you asking me?" "I don't know. I just kind of had to. You're a total weirdo, you know that. Takes one to know one." Jugo felt like facepalming himself at this when Karen splattered Suigetsu's face on the training grounds. Anko was laughing her ass off again. Her team was hilarious. Shizuka growled. She couldn't capitalize her attacks at the Hyuga heiress, finding her defense to be much more formidable than anticipated. As Hanata had continued to pressure her, Shizuka saw an opportunity when Hanata went to thrust her fingers to Shizuka's left shoulder. The foreign kunoichi flipped her umbrella in a reverse grip and tilted Hanata's blow sideways once more. This time, Shizuka followed through. She planted the tip of her umbrella, blade still out, to the ground and quickly used the handle as support and delivered a kick straight towards Hanata's right shoulder. Hanata stumbled back, seeing the flaw of her juho, but regained her ground long enough to see Shizuka throw her umbrella upwards. As the umbrella peaked, it righted itself up and began spinning wildly. A Megami no Odori. Sanban no Hari, Rain God's Dance. 1000 Needles. A rain of needles thus fell upon Hanata, who then spun around in a blur and used her clan technique, Hakusho Kaden, 8 trigrams whirl. A dome of chakra then escaped from Hanata as the needles were effectively deflected away from her. Shizuka wasn't done yet though and began weaving through several hand signs. Fuden. Mutsu no Yari, Wind Release. 6 spears. 6 javelins made of wind then appeared beside Shizuka, 3 on each side of her. With a flick of her hand, she launches them at Hanata one by one. Hanata dodged the first by jumping to the side only to stop as the second stopped her from taking another stop further. A third had appeared, this time lower than she would have liked. But Hanata managed to evade in time by jumping. 3 more spears lunged at her, narrowly hitting her, but managed to evade them all just in time as Shizuka commanded her spears of wind to return to her. Wind user. Would expect those to be nearly non-existent from where she comes from. Asuma commented while Kurenai nodded. She glanced back to Hanata. A well of pride escapes her as she sees the progress Hanata has made throughout the years as her student. She then glances back to the Hyuga group to the other side and noticed that the elders were now keen on watching this match now that Hanata had performed the Kaden. Resorting to ninjutsu now, is she? I find that this will be much more difficult for Hanata-sama from this point on. Neji mentions and Hanabi grins. Neji ni sama. From this point on, Ne-sama will not hold back. Beside her, Konohamaru looked at the Hyuga curiously and then turned to look at Naruto, who was watching the fight closely. He had tried to take some of Hanabi's observation skills to the test of his own volition and found surprised that his role model was looking at Hanata in anticipation. Hanata ne-chan sounds like she's been holding back. Even Naruto ni is watching closely. So you are finally taking this seriously. Hanata mentioned and remained still as Shizuka only gave a nod. I was merely testing the waters as it were. Taijutsu alone, I know I could not best a Hyuga without relying on my Bukijutsu to even the playing field. But since you know the Kaden, I am forced to rely on ninjutsu and Bukijutsu to keep up. It was then that Shizuka grabbed one of the wind javelins beside her and started to twirl it around like a true spear. To be more precise, a naginata. The javelin then took form of the intended shape, now glowing blue from the staff to the blade. Hanata noticed the seals wrapping up on the girl's gauntlets. The winds picked up the pace as it swirls around Shizuka. Prepare yourself, Hanata dono. This is my Shippujin no Jingi, sacred treasure of the storm god. Just then, the remaining spears of wind mimicked the weapon in Shizuka's held weapon and turned into naginata as well. The Hyuga elders watched in interest, anticipating what the heir apparent would do. They were all astonished when Hanata maintained her calm and shouted, Suzaku-sama. To me. A small red bird then puffs out in smoke and landed on Hanata's head. It then changed form as fire blazed from Hanata's form and the red bird began to be consumed by the flames. Its figure was then changed to a large bird with 4 trailing tail-like structures behind it, with its neck extending and turning into a red phoenix. Shiteno. Minami no Shiratsu. Suzaku. 4 guardian gods. Alignment to the south. Vermilion bird. Fire blazed all around Hanata as her form now sported a pair of red wings of chakra at her back, with the feather constructs turning to a lighter orange color. The 4 tail-like protrusions of Suzaku were all present, as well as they were attached to the wings, rising up as at the very tip of these tails had tongues of flame resting on them. Long have I waited for this moment. I asked for Naruto-kun to keep of what he knew about your abilities in order to be fair to you. But I also must confess, I wanted to see your best and hope that I will beat you there. Because I wanted you to know, that even with your best, I shall still prevail over you. Shizuka seemed to smile at Hinata's words. I see now that you have a certain ruthless nature about you. I cannot help but admire your resolve. Shizuka tightens her grip on her jutsu and leapt at Hinata. But you will see that my resolve will not bend. Hinata flapped her wings of chakra as Shizuka approached her. The lance of wind came was over her head as Hinata evaded just in time. One of the tail feathers made its way to Hinata and the Hyuga grabbed the flame with her left palm. Bakushugeki, burst palm strike. Boom. A loud explosion escapes the area as Hinata let loose the flame from her palm and it expanded in mid-air just as Shizuka had turned to look. Everyone looking managed to brace themselves as a shockwave escaped from the epicenter of the blast as Hinata was thrown back by the force but stabilized herself in mid-air. This is an entirely new form. I was not prepared by the impact of that jutsu. I can't use this here or I might end up damaging the area around me. Suzaku replied, each of us are aspects of not just an element but of dominion over attributes. Byako has dominion over speed, I have dominion over power, Genbu for defense and Seryu for skill. Suzaku could not answer straight to its summoner. A dragon slithers and patiently mauls on its prey. Down below, the Hyuga that were not Neji, Hanabi or Hiashi were looking at the heiress shocked. They had never seen this kind of Juken before. The ability to resonate with a summon, and apply their taijutsu style to it was a curious case study for them concerning their style. The Juken itself was effective, but to see it vary from the heiress since the beginning of this match was surprising. It was no small fact that the Hyuga were masters of their craft but Hiashi had warned them. Being a master of their said craft was what made them predictable and made their enemies aware of that fact. Hiashi was no fool. That much, they knew. The man had envisioned for them that there will come a time where their style will become obsolete against the face of an ever-changing world. The world knew of their style and more strategies were being developed ever since in dealing with the Juken. He had told them time and again, that they needed to see the progress of the style in the hands of the young and that said counter strategies would make the Juken more adaptable. Now they were seeing it firsthand and they have no words to describe such a sight before them. The smoke and ash cleared, and from the dust and debris, they saw the foreign ninja relatively unharmed, and the 5 blue spears of wind spinning madly around her. A jutsu that can be used for both offense and defense. It is likely you learned that after fighting against Naruto-kun. The wind that must have been conjured up by your jutsu managed to negate the impact earlier. Am I correct to assume this? Shizuka made a smile as she turned to Hanata that was floating in mid-air, small embers of flames escaping from her fiery wings. She looked like much of the legendary bird as well. Your deduction skills are on par. But that won't help you. Shizuka crouches down for a few seconds, stillness born of years of training, before she leapt at the Hyuga at a surprising height and she raised her weapon overhead and slashed down hard at Hanata who managed to get out of range and flew back as she watched the polearm miss her entirely. The 5 remaining wind spears aimed their blades at her and Hanata flailed the 4 feathered burning tails to her front, swatting the spears away from her and sending them flying. I've seen enough. Suzaku-sama. Shun-en, flash fire. It was not a request, but a command. Hanata did not want to drag the fight on and Suzaku, seeing Hanata grow impatient and probably being affected by its own impetuousness, decided to follow through with what its summoner had in mind. The tongues of flames burning from its tails grew fiercer and fiercer, its orange hue changing to pure white, and then just as it reached its peak, it vanished as it was snuffed. Then, everything went all white. An ear-bursting explosion escapes from the area. The area cleared, and the trees caught in the radius of that explosion were now nothing more than ashes. Wooden trunks burned down, and the water that had come into contact with the jutsu evaporated in a second. The crowd that were watching them had went back farther to escape from the blast itself. Hanata looked down, and saw Shizuka on the ground, her jutsu dispelled. She had come out relatively unscathed, but some of the singed clothing and burn marks were present on the girl's arms and legs. Her enemy was on the ground, motionless, unconscious. Hanata turned to her father, who had managed to survive the explosion by using the kaiden. Hiashi watched as the flame of wings behind his daughter's back had disappeared altogether and a red bird had suddenly popped on Hanata's shoulder. Winner of this match, Hyuga Hanata. Kumo. Ni Yugido bowed in front of her superior. The Raikage stood before her with expectations set on his mind. His best shinobi had come home after a seemingly easy but important mission to keep an eye on a rising power by the seas. It had taken months of intelligence reports and spies sent to this country as he caught wind of a daimyo consolidating power by gathering a paltry of missing nin to do the job for him of gathering all the necessary tools for his power base. The Raikage, after learning of how his enemies can be as cunning as he, decided for a less direct and careful approach in weakening his perceived foes. Konoha had taught him that lesson. And the ninja that he had assigned to do the dirty work for him had paid the ultimate price for nothing. The family who had suffered from his loss were compensated, but they decided to move away from the center of military power in Kaminari no Kuni and go to someplace in the east. I may have felt disappointment from this, but the man knew that such blunders would happen even if he did stack plan after plan for them. So now, in the prospect of another belligerent country threatening the borders of his own, the Raikage decided to play the less aggressive game. Ah, I expected that you to arrive later than I thought. How did your mission go? In terms of gaining a new ally in trade, we've succeeded in making a deal with Yuki no Kuni. Yugito answered. The Raikage raised an eyebrow at this, sensing a but in her message. Kazuhana Dotu, the former daimyo of Yuki no Kuni, was not deemed as the right person to rule by the noble families and common folk. At our arrival, we could see that the country was entrenched in a civil war with the resistance mainly made up of noble samurai families that disagreed on the future of their country. That was the initial assessment that we could see. With nothing to unify them, these families created alliances of their own and started several heavily and coordinated campaigns against Dotu that were deemed as failures. I even partook in these skirmishes myself and initially saw that these rebellious folk could not withstand a shinobi raid on their bases of operation. That is, until they discovered the legitimate heiress to the former daimyo's line. The Raikage became intrigued by his subordinate's words. Now learning of the political situation in Yuki no Kuni, the Raikage seemed to begin a series of scenarios playing in his head. What he never expected though, came from Yugito's next set of stories. An actress that seemed to have been hiding in Hai no Kuni was identified as Kazuhana Saozutsu's, the daimyo before Dotu, daughter by one of the family's retainers. It was through his negotiations with Konoha that they thought of finally laying rest to their squabbles and coalesce as a true alliance to fight against Dotu. So the alliance has sought help from Konoha. I'm sure you've clashed with them knowing that you were on opposite sides. Yugito gave a nod. Yes, we did. But we ultimately stopped when one of the shinobi from Konoha proposed an idea of a three-way trade alliance to halt on what would seem to be a tipping point. A crisis averted. The Raikage didn't know if he should feel angry or proud that his shinobi seemed to have handled themselves amicably now that he knew that Konoha was also aware of this belligerent country. And what of these shinobi? Yugito was silent for a few seconds, the words of I were expectant of her. She gave out a reply. These shinobi, 3 of them, are young. Not as strong as Cage level yet, but they have the potential to classify as S-class level threats. One of them, I am particularly wary of. His lineage denotes the name you are familiar with, Raikage-sama. Uzumaki. I paused at those words. The Uzumaki was a clan that was scattered to the winds. Their legend ended during the Second Shinobi World War. Their country laid waste, their people dead. The Uzumaki bloodline, sought after by their innate sealing ability and the even rarer ability to suppress Biju chakra that were on par with the Uchiha and Senju clans of Konoha. One had suddenly appeared in their radar. He remembered all those years ago, his father, still the Raikage, decided to kidnap the known Uzumaki within Konoha's walls. They had failed in capturing said person and were thwarted by now what he could tell was a young Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato. The Uzumaki were sought after by their wealth of knowledge on Fuinjutsu and a particularly nasty rumor that would have brought another superpower to rise. I stopped his musings at this as Yugito continued. It is also to my knowledge, that this boy is also the container of the Kyuubi no Yuko. The Raikage's eyes turned into pinpricks at this realization. What did this shinobi look like, Yugito? What are his skills? What did you see? Yugito held her breath for a second. She took a deep breath. The anxiety of having to carry this revelation for days were not met with solace until she had arrived in Kumo. Yugito had to force to recall of what this particular shinobi looked like and what exactly he could do. Quote. Blonde spiky hair, ocean deep blue eyes, 3 whisker marks on each cheek. If I were to compare this person's looks, I would say that he looks like a replica of the Yondaime Hokage. I clenched his fists. He closed his eyes in anger, trying to control it and failing by the second. His skills. Cage Bunshin seems to be his favorite and most used skill. He uses it in conjunction to a repertoire of futon jutsu and can actually fly, and his ceiling proficiency can be compared to a master. He also has this jutsu that he names as the Rasengan, and from the reports before reaching, he favors strength over speed, but that doesn't mean that his speed is lagging. His seals had managed to hold me down long enough to propose the idea. I was supposed to kill him, but his words held merit in considering the alliance, and we generally agreed. Any further skirmishes done, and it would have probably resulted in him unleashing the Nibi from the seal and transferring it to another. He may very well could tamper with my seal, but he chose not to. So rather than risking the Nibi in the hands of Konoha, I decided to listen to his proposal instead. By now, all the alarm bells were ringing in the Raikage's head. The said boy's skill was almost an exact replica of his most hated foe during the Third War. Yugito's decision had been a prudent one. If indeed this boy was an Uzumaki, then it did not bode well with Yugito, but it did mean that the boy was foolish enough to not press the advantage. And what do you make of this boy's behavior? Idealistic in the least, conniving at best. He finds solutions where neither of us are at an advantage. I nodded. The large and hulking man turned to his assistant. Have this boy put in the bingo book. Anyone who catches the boy will be rewarded with at least 3 million. This boy is dangerous. I then turned to Yugito and a question, the complete name. Uzumaki Naruto. Chapter 35. Sublimation. Kei's no Kuni, undisclosed location. In the dead of the night, two individuals walked into the chilling sandy dunes of the desert wearing black cloaks with red clouds emblazoned on them, as well as a matching pair of straw hats over their heads. One with the humpback and gigantic tail made of pure ironwood and metal swished lazily into the night. It is finally time we make a move, eh? One of them asked, the taller of the two. The one with a slouching humpback merely grunted in response before replying. 3 years, in that amount of time, Akatsuki has not only garnered the necessary tools it needs, it also gained enough power to challenge even the 5 great powers. Pain is a terrifying man, having all this arranged before us. The taller of the two smirked, a fact obscured for the both of them. But the person's body language spoke enough for both of them. And to target a cage too. I'm sure that man feels confident now that we are out in the limelight for everyone to see. His partner, uncaring at this point of hiding his anonymity. Lofty goals often present you to the world at large and judge you as they see fit. I have had no reservations of doing things in the dark for long, especially now that Konoha and its allies are made aware of our existence. The taller of the two didn't seem to be disturbed of the fact that these 5 superpowers would be watching them very closely. Well, technically Asuchi no Kuni has been laying dormant for at least 2 years now, with its ninja decreasing its observations of countries across the continent. So you're saying that Suna is probably prepared for us when we do strike, Sasori Dana? Probably. They are. The humped-back figure now known as Sasori replied. The man had survived long enough to have seen wars in his life to see how the powerful villages react to their movements. Konoha had been their most annoying so far, as their strategies had ultimately foiled many of their would-be schemes in getting into the village. His spies were working themselves to the bone trying to come up with a path that leads straight to its now official to Jinchuriki, but even with Itachi's advice, Konoha's borders became a very difficult place to infiltrate. It was much like a labyrinth now than it was an impenetrable fortress. Suna is the weakest of the 5, in terms of resources, in terms of manpower, and in terms of everything else. Their position on the map has not done them any favors. But the quality of their shinobi should never be compared to the lesser villages. They have a cage for a reason. Best that you do not look down on the cage, Deidara. The taller of the two, now called Deidara, merely chuckled. Oh, I wouldn't dare. I know for a fact how strong a cage is. How even a mere wisp of their chakra shows incredible strength. It is rather unfortunate that in the first move we have to make, it had to be the leader of one of the 5 great nations. Sasori could care less. When he joined Akatsuki, he had already seen Pain make lofty goals after lofty goals. The man was high-minded in his ideals, but Sasori did not care for such. What Pain wanted was his strength, and although powerful, the supposed leader of Akatsuki would rather let his allies do the work for him as he had other things to do. At least, that's what Sasori thought. The leader of Akatsuki has always arranged short and brief meetings using the Gentoshin no Jutsu, magical lantern body technique, and would assign them specific roles whenever the time to meet up came. There was no further discussion. Not even a moment to peer into the mind of the man who would command them any assignment he wished. He had faced pain before, and other than that, there was not much interaction between them. But he did understand that the leader was not against meting out punishment against those that crossed him or betray Akatsuki. Even now, Pain still had a vendetta against Orochimaru, as the man refused to say out his name unless discussing the Snake Sage's demise, and he outright made the death of the Snake Master a priority just under the collection of the tailed beasts. It made Sasori chuckle for a bit. In the old stories and folklores around the world, he had read that most gods were petty. It seemed that Pain was just as well, if not more so, as the man was the closest thing to what Sasori call a divine being. But you have to admire the history of these Kazekage, Sasori Dana. All of the current Kazecage's predecessors, their fates are met with the most explosive of times. They die gruesome and horrifying deaths. Can you imagine the beauty of such a fleeting life? To lie from abject obscurity and to die gloriously in the end in a fraction of a second, like a flower only meant to bloom and die at the same time. Sasori was brought out of his own thoughts when he heard Deidara speak of his ideal. He grunted at his partner's opinion on art with clear distaste. That's precisely why I consider you a plebeian, Deidara. You do not see the value of preservation of art and its longevity. Art should be maintained, to stand across time and eons. To have your work be remembered for eternity. Art should not be fleeting, it should be seen and felt by all senses and serve as a reminder of the artist. Art should be forever, art should be eternal. Deidara disagreed vehemently and saw Sasori's view on art as an affront to his ideal. Art should be an explosion. Clearly at an impasse, but not enough to disrupt them from their objective, the two began arguing all the way to Suna. They had managed to sneak inside the borders of Kase no Kuni via Kawa no Kuni, and from there, studied the gaps of the patrols and where they usually converge or disperse. It had taken them several weeks of information gathering and infiltration until Sasori had found a way in by his own spy network. Now, in the middle of nowhere in Kase no Kuni, both men were making their way towards Suna, and it would be another 6 hours of this cold trek in the night before they can even see the cleverly hidden walls of Sunagaku. Unbeknownst to them, several hawks had quietly circled above before they made their way towards the village. I see the walls of the village, Deidara claimed, adjusting the device in his left eye to zoom in on the village itself. How many years has it been since I came here? Sasori wondered. It had been far too long since stepping on to the village once more. Years of being on the run, of looking for ways to perfect his art, recruited by Akatsuki. Now he returns to Suna, repeating the same actions he had done all those years ago. It was quite an ironic twist of fate, that the puppeteer Akasuna no Sasori, the assassin of the third Kazekage, would come back home and participate in a would-be assassination of the Godime Kazekage. Hey, time to get this show on the road, Deidara said and grabbed some substance from his pouch. It was white clay. To their backs, the sun was slowly rising to the dunes of the desert. A new dawn approaches Kase no Kuni. Deidara then reveals a pair of mouths that formed within his hands. Deidara grinned viciously as the mouths in his hands began to chew eagerly on the clay and spat out a formed clay bird out of the mouth of the left hand and another one on the right. With that, Deidara performed a hand seal and the bird on the left exploded in a cloud of smoke. Deidara then jumped and mounted the giant bird on its back as it began to flap its wings and soared into the opposite direction of the village and into the sky before making a sharp turn back towards the skies of the village hidden in the sands. Sasori observed Deidara's approach from the skies silently for a few seconds before he decided to walk towards the front of the small crevice of the walls of Suna as if he had not a care in the world. The man only stopped when one shinobi had met him there. Have the defenses been breached? He asked. The one Suna shinobi to his front gave a wordless nod. Behind the Suna nin lay two people dead, one of them whose blood splattered on the walls of the village and then smearing down as he lay his back to the very walls he swore to protect. Another had managed twitch and held his head up, and with the last of his remaining time on this world, put up a hand seal before he spoke. Why Yura, you damn traitor. I should have known. Sasori looked at the one that his spy had unfortunately missed. With a mere flick of his tail, Sasori had ended the man's life and stabbed the man through and through at the heart. But it was already too late. Not a scant few seconds later, Suna was already up in arms and sand had exploded upwards like multiple geysers all around the village. Sasori turned to his spy and said, "Gather the rest, we will be in for a fight." Yura merely nodded and disappeared with a distortion of wind. Konoha. It had been 5 days since the incident with the two kunoichi from Nadeshiko village. 3 days worth of fame that Naruto really didn't want about him. Word had spread quickly between the bout of his current lover and the kunoichi who had sought after him around Konoha that whenever he was seen in town, women tend to look at him warily while the men were staring at him like he had somehow become worse than the Kyuubi incarnate. Not just that though, Kiba often joined the men that were staring at him as if he had taken away something precious from them. It was a good thing that he found solace within the Fuinjutsu team during these times and also found comfort with the Hyuga heiress. After the two dignitaries from Nadeshiko left with a promise to return at that, Naruto made it absolutely clear to everyone that he had no hand in how things turned out this way. He was not a womanizer, damn it. Naruto was a show-off, and even as he toned down in his flamboyant attitude of the need to be at the center stage, he definitely didn't want this kind of attention. Not all of the days of rest had been a waste though. With Hanata's help, Naruto had managed to make strides in his improvements for Senjutsu. That and he made a great headway towards his wind element. He just wished that he could get over the slump he had when concerning the Hiraishin. With a sigh, Naruto continued to walk on his way towards the research and development building but was greeted by Sasuke, whose first words to him was an insult. Moron. Asshole. The two greeted as if it was an automatic response or an everyday occurrence. Their banter was complete shit, both of them knew that, but these two could insult each other and they would strangely not find it demeaning. Rather, they were more comfortable calling each other names rather than their given ones. They figured that they just rolled with it and were fine being complete assholes to each other without much flair these days. Their rivalry was fierce, they knew that too, but it was mellowed out, less hostile and more respectful towards each other. It was a little weird that Sasuke was seeking him for now and the blonde had to wonder why. His teammate did not seek anyone out of the village unless it involved training or something professional like a mission. Sasuke was the definition of a consummate pro, a beast of few habits as they were called. And the Uchiha was the model of it, Naruto was sure. Sasuke, seeing one of his blonde teammates' eyebrows raising in wonder, handed him the newest bingo book that was published by the intelligence department. Any reasons as to why you're giving me a copy of this? Naruto asked and Sasuke shrugged. Flip the pages towards the new bounties section, was the Uchiha's only answer, and Naruto did so. What he saw shocked him. On the first 2 pages of the new book, his face was plastered on the very first page of the section, as did his teammates. Uzumaki. Kazama. Naruto. Reward. 3 million Ryo. Rank. Chunin. Affiliation. Konoha. Threat level. A. Naruto wondered as he read further into the details presented to him. Apparently he had an epitaph now. Kazama was fitting. And badass to boot. It also listed the skills he had presented during his skirmishes in Snow Country. Many of them were only just skills that he did indeed use during his mission in Yuki no Kuni, and was glad that he managed to keep his more serious skills under wraps. Sage knows how the world would take it if people found out he had used Minamoto no Banbutsu. As he read further, he saw Sasuke's profile as well. Name. Uchiha. Kagemusha. Sasuke. Reward. 2.8 million Ryo. Rank. Chunin. Affiliation. Konoha. Threat level. A. Naruto hummed at this and looked at Sasuke, who shrugged. Naruto always knew that the bastard would wind up somewhere here sooner or later these days. What Naruto didn't expect was how his head was worth 200,000 more than his teammates. He looked at the summary profile for skills on the Uchiha and found that the asshole was confident enough that Enten was listed here as a skill attributed to him. He sighed as he continued to another page and was surprised to see Sakura's face in it. Name. Haruno. Tekken. Sakura. Reward. 2.6 million Ryo. Rank. Chunin. Affiliation. Konoha. Threat level. A. So what's got you showing this to me, Sasuke? You wouldn't even show this to me like you are right now because my bounty is bigger than yours. Naruto replied and looked at Sasuke with half-lidded eyes. He could tell that the Uchiha didn't feel petty as much as he seemed. Sasuke scoffed at that. He didn't care about his bounty. Not when one of Naruto's skills listed in his summary profile was weaseling his way out of tight spots. Look at the next entry. And Naruto did. Altogether, these 3 comprise of a newly dangerous unit called the Hokage no Makami. Not since the time of the Densetsu no Sanin would there be a three-man cell group that would be considered as an S-rank threat. Approach with caution. Total reward for these three is at 20 million ryo if they are captured or killed as a group. Rewards will be given by Kumogakur. Holy shit. Naruto was incredulous to say the least. It seems like our friends from Kumogakur had reported us to the Raikage. The man must be petty enough to have us included in their list. That or he's being overtly cautious and wants us out of the picture before we become a legitimate threat. Sasuke looked down at the book and thought about the consequences of something like this. It was true that a good and tangible way to look up infamy was to see the bingo book. He had a glance at Kakashi's bounty once and he was awestruck to find that Kakashi had a bounty of at least 8 million ryo for his head, inching very close to Itachi's lone 10 million ryo mark. As a rank not a legitimate threat enough? Naruto asked and Sasuke shook his head. Unless we can go toe-to-toe with Itachi, I'll consider us a headache for the great powers at best. You make it sound like we'd need to destroy an entire village in order to come across as S-rank threats. Naruto replied and Sasuke nodded seriously. I'm not going to lie, Naruto. In terms of scaling, we only have a handful of jutsu that we can viably use against S-rank shinobi, not delving into our innate abilities such as the Mangekyo and the use of your friend there. Which is something we really do need in the future now that we've become infamous. People will be out hunting for our heads. As major players go, we've officially joined a very dangerous club. Naruto sighed at this and grabbed the bingo book from Sasuke's hands. The blonde began to walk and Sasuke followed. I understand. Just in time too. I've got to make my way to the research and development building and heading straight to the training grounds after this. I think I've found a nifty way for a new jutsu I wanted to master. Already? Sasuke asked and Naruto smirked. Trust me, with this jutsu I'm about to do, I'm going to blow everybody away with just a flick of the wrist. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at this and asked, expectantly, Kakashi tells me you've been training to use the Hiraishin no Jutsu. He suspects that you are close to a breakthrough. Naruto scoffs, hardly. I only have my speed to be of any help for now. But I've got something else in mind. The ones I am close to finishing are the Rasengan's next step, a secret Fuinjutsu seal that I've been working on, and then Senjutsu. Sasuke was curious at this. Senjutsu. The art of harnessing chakra from nature. I've heard from Sakura that you've been looking at a way to stop the degradation of your eyesight from using the Mangekyo. How is that coming along? Sasuke shook his head. There's been no progress. From what I can gather, there is only one way to obtain a Mangekyo Sharingan that doesn't destroy my eyesight. But that's a method we don't have or can't replicate at the moment. You try finding another pair of Mangekyo Sharingan eyes that can work around this village. Naruto hummed at this and placed a hand on his chin and began thinking, that would be a problem. But have you asked Sakura and her team to harness some of your own cells just to recreate your Mangekyo Sharingan? The old bat did say that it's a feasible option. Sasuke nodded. I'll look into it. Speaking of seals, what's with the new seal you've been cooking? Naruto grinned and gave his teammate a hint. Have you ever thought of a concept of the phrase, two become one? Sasuke looked at the blonde with a raised eyebrow. What? Something like a fusion. Naruto hummed. Yeah, something like that more or less. But that's still a ways off. It's still a concept. After this and working my way with Senjutsu, I'll probably go ahead and start that. As they made their way to the research and development building and into the Fuinjutsu office, Naruto went to oversee the concept and parts of the group that currently only consisted of 10 people, as they all were meticulously looking at the seal matrix and core designs that Naruto was overseeing. Hey guys. All 10 members stopped their studies and looked up to see the blonde grinning at them and waved. Naruto-san. Some of them greeted smiling at the blonde in return. Sasuke, on the other hand, looked at his teammate. He had never expected Naruto to hang out with geeks since they were genin. How's the appraisal going? Naruto asked. All of the members of the group looked excited for a moment and they went to crowd just in front of the blonde and they all looked giddy for a moment. Naruto did as well. Sasuke found it incredulous seeing his friend like a nerd like the rest of the group inside concerning seals, and the seal babble this group into that Sasuke couldn't grasp his head around made him realize his teammate had been absolutely misconstrued as a total idiot. You see, The way this works is that the core has to be written with this stroke that way so that the chakra applied here as a core can regulate the energy to cause a high-speed push to spin and cause enough disruption that the matrices don't delineate due to the vibration. Naruto said this and the team hung on to his every word. Sasuke tried to glean in on what Naruto was talking about and found it extremely too technical even for him. He was still going to call him an idiot after all of this over and done with. I see. So the reason we can generate enough force and cause an energy surge relies on the fact that we need the chakra not to be consumed but amplified 1,000 times over by causing vibration that cause a multiplication effect similar to the cage bunshin. But since we need as much energy output as we could, the fuel of chakra needed for this seal will have been reduced to as much as 100 people. 100 people for a single seal? Sasuke asked and Naruto turned to Sasuke as did the sealing research team. Well, 100 cage level shinobi, that is. Naruto replied and Sasuke gawked at it. How the hell is that even feasible? Sasuke asked and the group shrugged. One of the researchers answered him. It's still developing. I would say that with this new sealing method, we can generate so much amplified chakra that we can add more and more sealing matrices and micro cores as a way to reduce the need even further. Though we still need a proper stabilizing seal that can help us maintain that and not blow up the entire village in a cascading explosion, I'd say you can give us a year to finish and we can crank this bad boy out to Tsunade-sama. Naruto whooped in joy. That's awesome. I knew you guys were so cool. All you needed was a chance. Naruto-san. No one ever called us as cool before. Thanks for the encouragement. The core group of nerds madly in love with seals all embraced each other with tears streaming from their eyes with Naruto joining them as well. Ah. Now Sasuke understood. These people were crowding to Naruto because Naruto always knew what to say to motivate them. That and he had the sincerity to appreciate this bunch of nerds that they would be way too excited to have someone as famous as Naruto to help their self-esteem. That was actually a pretty good quality of leadership right there. Knowing how to motivate people to let them finish a task for you. A weakness, the voice in his head scoffed at the idea. But Sasuke disagreed. This is a very good trait to have. Something that Sasuke didn't have. He had realized. There were things that came naturally to a person, things that they were good at. Naruto was good at things that Sasuke doesn't see himself in as much as Naruto isn't as good to things that he didn't see himself in. That was another observation that Sasuke had in his teammate. It was why for Naruto, being Hokage sounded a lot less far-fetched as people make it out to be. Naruto stopped celebrating with the nerds and then asked, that aside though, how are we progressing with the other two projects? One of the Fuinjutsu researchers nodded and stepped forward. Project Snake Eater is nearing completion, Naruto-san, with the samples provided by the medic core coming from your friend, I'm sure we can finally come to a satisfying solution in no time. It has gained so much leaps and bounds especially with your help. Sasuke assumed that Project Snake Eater was for the cursed seal. He had to admit, the name was pretty catchy. And Project White Wings? Naruto asked expectantly and the one earlier nodded. It is a far more arduous task, I'm afraid. The seal we are currently looking into is quite old and many of the intricacies working out the seal and its purpose had been lost to time. We do, however, think that it's feasible and the research notes left behind by our predecessors are pointing out that it is indeed an easier task. The trick is how we can cause some of the locks to loosen up. It was then that Sasuke spoke. I would assume that you are talking about the caged bird seal. From what I understand, the only way the seal goes is if the one who wields it dies. Sasuke seemed to recall something from his earlier days as Genin. He recalled the mist, a porcelain white mask and a boy with long hair. Why not try inducing the subject into a temporary death state? The sealing team sans Naruto all scowled at Sasuke and looked absolutely livid. Nobody asked you, pretty boy. Yeah, we don't need a guy with his whole life ahead of him talking about our job. Go back to your house and bang your chicks. Leave us losers alone. Naruto then proceeded to smack them all in the heads with a chop in one fluid motion and seemingly took command of the team. All right, settle down. He's only trying to be helpful here, guys. And you shouldn't be jealous of Sasuke's popularity with the girls, you don't have to worry about stuff like that. You'll all find your special someone one day, just work on yourselves and try to be better and maybe you can get that special someone. Besides, it's not that great being the center of unwanted attention, ya know. The team was silent for a few seconds but then began huddling with each other. You know, now that I think about it, Naruto-san is pretty popular with the ladies too. Hey now, I don't think that's. Naruto was suddenly cut off when one of them added fuel to the fire. I heard he got a girlfriend way before any of his peers had. Not to mention that there's a rumor going around that Naruto-san somehow got the attention of Fujika's Yukie. Hey, guys. F for real. Funheim is like, totally my waifu, dude. And she got the hots for Naruto-san. Guys. Hey man, I know you like 3D girls and all, but I just want you to know that you've got shit taste. Guys. The team all then turned around to Naruto with jealousy burning within their eyes. Naruto didn't look quite amused at the fact that even his own people seemed to be thinking that he was somehow living every man's dream. We are straying way off topic here. All of you get back to your posts and get to work, damn it. Surprisingly, everyone straightened up and went back to work by themselves, obeying Naruto when he asserted command, recognizing him as a superior in their team. Sasuke saw his friend for the first time in a different light. TCH, fucking harem protagonist. Naruto went over the hapless idiot that made the snide remark. I heard that. After a few more pointers and having his team take care of business on this end of Naruto's job, the duo finally went outside and saw a messenger bird circling above them overhead. Sasuke looked passively above as the hawk encircled the air above them for a few seconds before it went away back to the aviary. I guess break time's over. Naruto nodded as they made their way towards the mission briefing section. Arriving at the building, they were met with Sakura, Kakashi, who was waving at them, and Team Guy, who merely looked at them with Neji nodding his head. Tsunade was holding her hands together as she had her elbows on her desk. A worrying glance escaped her as she looked over to Naruto and Sasuke. Good, you are earlier than expected, which means I can give you an early briefing. Tsunade stood up and grabbed several folders from her desk and handed them over to the 8 shinobi. This is an emergency S-rank mission meant for 8 people. Suna has sent out a distress call asking for aid from us in order to rescue their Kazekage. To this, the shinobi all looked at their Hokage in surprise. A cage has been beaten. How? Akatsuki has managed to capture Sabaku no Gaara, the Godime Kazekage. One of his trusted Chunin, a man by the name of Baki, had secretly sent this message to us while he argued with Suna's elders. He is skeptical with how Suna's governing bodies are going to deal with this crisis. He thinks that they will not lift a finger and has ordered an immediate recall of his sister, Temari. To this, the more savvy members of the group were frowning. Kakashi in particular was the first one to voice his doubts, so they are immediately planning to replace Gaara with Temari as Kazekage. Guy gave a nod. The timing is suspect in this case. It's almost as if there is someone within Suna who wants the current Kazekage gone, and they will do all the necessary means that they must. It seems the current Kazekage isn't as well loved as we had hoped. Tsunade nodded at this. I can see your points, but I won't have you delve into Wind Country politics anytime soon. The only meddling we'll do is when we retrieve said Kazekage and make this look like it was an incident. Certainly, we'll leave Baki to do his work in snuffing out the traitors within Suna. You 8 have different objectives this time. The first team is to assist Baki in Suna and pose as diplomats under my name and secure targets of high value that would oppose those that do not approve of Gaara, such as his brother, and the second is to intercept the 2 Akatsuki members that have captured Gaara before we lose him. At minimum, 2 Chunin will be the ones who will go to these 2 destinations. I recommend having a tracker and someone who can do flying jutsu on the second team, which means by default, Naruto should be the one with the second unit along with Neji. All of them nodded and began discussing team adjustments when someone had barged into the office as the people within the room looked at the door to the new arrival. Temari arrived, a look of concern and panic laden on her face. Behind her was Shikamaru, who was trying to calm her down. I've heard, my brother's been captured and Baki is sniffing out traitors in my home. Please add this to your mission parameters, Hokage-sama. I wish to be escorted back to Suna. Tsunade was surprised at this. When Suna sends their best messenger bird back to Konoha, it was usually a sign of something happening. Temari was familiar with the messenger birds of her home, and seeing their fastest hawk had been the one to deliver the message, she was sure something had come up. She made her way to the cryptologist's section and from there, knew what she had to do. Along the way, she had ran into Shikamaru, who she had pulled along and mentioned to him what had transpired. Needless to say, The boy had tried to calm her down as best as he could before she could say anything that would be detrimental. Despite Temari knowing what to do, she was still distraught and Shikamaru had to help her with what she needed to say to approve the message. An idea formed into Tsunade's head. She gave a small amused smile and nodded at Temari. Temari, despite the seriousness of the situation, you have the perfect timing. This will make our transition to Suna easier and more numbers on our side. The rest of you, prepare your gear and meet me on the roof in 5 minutes. Temari, stay here and I'll discuss to you Baki's plans and how you're involved. Temari gave a nod as the 8 assigned shinobi dispersed and prepared themselves. 5 minutes later, just as they were told, all 8 shinobi plus Temari and now, Shikamaru had assembled themselves in front of the Hokage. Sasuke wore his Anbu uniform and mask as well as his mother's katana behind him, just as Sakura wore her gear and set the twin short swords on her back. Lee was adjusting his bracers and shin guards while Tenten was fitting her white gloves perfectly on her hands and 2 scrolls were placed on her thighs as holsters. Neji then gave his teammates their wireless communicators as Naruto approached them, now wearing his sage cloak, and his wakizashi over his own black and orange uniform and vest. Looks like I'll be in your care for the time being, bushy brows. Lee gave the blonde a thumbs up and a nice guy pose as he added, we will make sure to find Kage-sama, Naruto-kun. We will not fail. Tsunade gave a cough to gather everyone's attention and spoke, I assume that you are all asking why I have Naruto with Team Guy this time. Baki reports that the Akatsuki member responsible for the abduction has a jutsu that can help them in flight. That and he has a peculiar ability of loosely related to bombing tactics, we assume it's a Kekkei Genkai wielder like the Bakuden, explosion release, so assume the worst. There are sightings of his partner but there were no mention of his abilities. But it seems that is the one responsible in infiltrating Suna. He may have connections inside the village. Assume the greater threat to be this mysterious figure. Lethal force is necessary. I will not make the mistake of underestimating them and neither should you. That's why you have a minimum of 2 Chunin per team, but considering the circumstances, I think your chances are good. Shikamaru. Tsunade turned to the heir of the Nara clan and spoke, your job for this mission is to be the official escort for Temari to Suna, find out what you can and work with Suna loyalists to come out and snuff the rats out into the limelight and direct Kakashi's team for assassination if need be. Baki understands that we are threading a fine needle through this controversy, so I take that you of all people should understand how important this mission will be. Sakura and Kakashi will act as your support, Sasuke will remain hidden throughout this mission and will act as your shadow. She then commanded her shinobi to leave immediately and all of them vanished in a swirl of leaves. Tsunade looked up towards the faces of her predecessors and uttered, this will be the first of many against them, I pray that you have given me the right choice. Not ever since the Third War that a team of more than 8 shinobi were scrambled for a mission so highly dangerous, that there was a high chance of a fatality with them. S-rank missions were missions of utter importance, where the safety of a village or its allies hang in the balance. That or something had crossed in the sights of the village's interest. Sasuke knew of that. This was the first time he had been given an S-rank mission, an opportunity to test himself against monsters, those that had reached his brother's level. If he could overcome this obstacle, then he was one step closer to Itachi. Such single-minded focus. Your obsession shall serve you well. I cannot help but see such an improvement from one such as you. The voice in his head commented. Sasuke growled. You are an annoying pest. What and who are you, anyway? Why are you here inside my head? The voice inside his head cackled madly as it echoed within Sasuke's head. Its mere presence had brought such a disturbance within the Uchiha as he traveled along with his comrades at top speed. I am a mere relic of the past, boy, nothing more. I was once the favored son, the one who should have inherited the will of my father, but I was not to be. I knew what lied beyond my father's teachings, what he kept from me, what he subjected my brother into, and what he ultimately failed to do. I am Otsutsuki Indra, the firstborn, the eye of unmatched talent, the true founder, and you are, my child, are my descendant that has gotten close to the ideal. Your chakra resonated with the lingering will of my former transmigrant and you have received none other my will, my will of power. Sasuke could tell that the person inside his head had only eyes for himself, a narcissistic yet overinflated sense of self-worth. Sasuke had to ask himself, could he turn out much like this man if he had decided to go along with Orochimaru? Or would he turn into him regardless? Does it bother you so that I, Otsutsuki Indra, approach you like you are a dog? Maybe you are. With all of that blind loyalty that you developed and your shared bonds with your foolish peers, that would certainly put you down to a level of a dog. Sasuke didn't look amused. Then stop associating yourself to one and get lost. I have neither the patience nor the tolerance for an obnoxious god wannabe. An impressive yet defiant resolve, you mongrel. We will see how far those fangs of yours can take you. In the meantime, Indra appeared beside the boy and gave a disturbing grin. We shall see who will remain superior. You, or I, the true inheritor of Ninshu. Sasuke scoffed at the man. Ninshu was a dead philosophy, or at least, a mythical one that was lost to the annals of history, old teachings forgotten by human society. It was a philosophy that did not exist to Sasuke. This man may speak highly of himself, but Sasuke knew. He knew that Indra was nothing more than a failure, and failures like Indra deserved to be forgotten by history. Sasuke-kun. Sakura disturbed him out of his thoughts as he saw his teammate look at him with a worried glance. He was expressing that stone-faced appearance once again. It was a sign that Sasuke was being lost in his own thoughts. It was a miracle that he could keep up despite the speed they were traveling in and how much they were moving through obstacles. Sakura could tell that Sasuke was having one of those episodes again, where his thoughts would drift him away. Being together with her teammate for so long, she could tell that whenever Sasuke was internalizing his own thoughts. And many of those, according to Sakura's suspicions, did not seem to benefit him at all. What is it, Sakura? You were looking like you were lost in your own thoughts again. Sakura mentioned, and Sasuke raised an eyebrow at this. Naruto seemed to have made his way towards them and said, "Are you anticipating that we are going to meet up with Itachi?" Itachi. The name of the man still brings a chill down his spine. Even though it was laden with hate and anguish, Sasuke could not be more afraid of encountering Itachi again. It opened a lot of old wounds, and 3 years ago, Itachi had successfully opened them flawlessly. Memories littered his mind, the trauma of years past coming back to him. And Sakura notices that Sasuke was clenching his fists tighter than before. Sasuke, I know you're itching to kill him, I understand your pain, but you're not alone. Never alone. Sasuke gave a scoff and said, I'm getting tired of that. Never alone, crap. I know that you'll be there. But this is something I have to do on my own. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that. I'm going to keep saying that, you know. Not just to annoy you, but because whatever we can't overcome on our own, we have others who can pick up whatever weaknesses you may have. It was Lee who then added, it is true, we are stronger together than apart, Sasuke-kun. You may not want us to be involved, but we will involve ourselves, anyway. Because we also want you to stop suffering. Sakura finished and Sasuke remained silent for a while. A few more seconds of silence as Sasuke answered, finally, I understand, you just can't leave me well alone. Naruto just smirked. Never, Sasuke, we won't ever leave you alone to bear your problems. You may think that this is for you alone, but the Uchiha clan was very much part of Konoha as it was a clan. I want to be a Hokage that others not only respect but also someone who considers everyone my family, my strength, my shield, my sword. That is why. Naruto's expression changes into a frown. I want to do everything I can for them, even if they strayed, even if they are far apart, I want to keep being a part of their lives. Temari looked at Naruto and noted that Naruto talked about his comrades closely to his own heart. A cage that cared much about beyond just their village was no cage at all, she thought. But she had to remind herself that current sensibilities did not translate to future ones. Maybe one day, it will be like that and Naruto may have those sensibilities to change things, but not now. Now was a time filled with uncertainties, and that uncertainty was how long a fragile peace could exist within the continent. An event like this, the kidnapping of the cage, may very well bring that peace to a close and enter another bloody war. That's why, I will do everything I can for Gaara. We might have started on a bad foot, but I know he earned that redemption. He mentioned to me just how much he wanted to be cage, how much the title meant to him now that he didn't want to fight for a lonely existence. Saving him is the least that I could do. Temari looked at the blonde once more, in awe of the blonde's benevolence for her brother. Shikamaru answered her just as he was behind. That's just who he is. He understood Gaara's pain, and that pain created a bond so deep that it hurts. Being a Jinchuriki, knowing the sadness that it entailed and the loneliness of the path that they walk, Temari had only truly understood Gaara after that faithful day in Konoha. She knew Gaara was her brother and wanted to develop a bond as well, but Gaara's murderous tendencies had stopped her from approaching him. It took a shinobi from another village willing to stand up against him, stand toe-to-toe with him and delivering a massive beatdown that Gaara was brought to his senses. Temari didn't have that kind of strength. The strength to stubbornly get back up and continuing to pound against insurmountable odds. To rage against the machine. Temari found out that these sensibilities she held now were trash. She looked at Shikamaru, who was giving her a knowing smirk. Did this bastard know what I was thinking? Judging from the boy's smile, then maybe yes, he probably knew. Damn geniuses. Wind Country, 24 hours later. They had arrived at the border of Kei's no Kuni, and it was here that Naruto and Team Guy separated from Kakashi's group. From this point on, Kakashi's team were to make their way towards Tsunade no Sato. In the aftermath of Akatsuki's attack, the team had already noticed the disarray from the patrol guards. Most of them looked disheartened while some were visibly biting their lips. But Temari's arrival had somewhat alleviated their doubts. Temari-sama, it's good that you have arrived sooner. Kage-sama, he's been taken away by the Akatsuki. Temari nodded, trying to stay calm amidst the crisis within the country. I've been informed. I'm making my way to Suna now to ensure some form of stability. Any news on my brother's whereabouts? The Suna shinobi looked down. Their despair was palpable. We've been searching since then. Not much of a trail is present, and Kankuro-sama has been missing as well. Temari remained silent at this realization, the information finally setting in. She began to think just what was going through Kankuro's mind before he went missing, and she could only think of one thing to arrive at her conclusion. Shikamaru seemed to be arriving to it as well. Perhaps he already knew while the rest of the team were forming the answers in their heads. We need something to track him down first, then we can trace the place where Gaara is. Sasuke answered. Kakashi shook his head. Our objective is to escort Temari to Suna and rendezvous with Baki-san there. Although I can feel your eagerness, Sasuke, let Naruto and the rest wrestle the information out. We have our own clear rules of engagement. Sasuke wanted to snap at Kakashi at that but withheld himself back. He knew his captain was right in this case. He looked down, trying to contain his emotions once again, and Shikamaru nodded. Kakashi then turned to his team and commanded them to head back to Suna and find Temari's brother. It doesn't mean we can help the others make their jobs easier. I will make arrangements if needed. For now, we find Kankuro. An ally less is not ideal in any circumstances. With that, the group nodded and began their search. Kakashi grabbed a kunai from his pouch and cut his finger. A trickle of blood escapes from the injured finger and began performing a set of hand seals. Kuchio's no jutsu. A wisp of smoke escapes the ground that Kakashi touched and cleared, seeing a pug with a blue vest and a headband of Konoha covering its head. Kakashi, you have another job for me? The dog asked, and Kakashi gave a wordless nod. We have to find a displaced Suna nin in this desert. Can you help us? Pakun scratched the back of his head with his forepaw and said, that might be a problem unless you specifically give me a scent. It was here that Temari volunteered. I'm looking for my brother. First order of business is to find Kankuro and secure him. Temari kneeled down and leant her arm forward. Pakun was fast at work at recognizing herself. There's a scent similar to yours, about several kilometers from where we are, and he's not moving. There's another just behind yours and it's moving in a straight line. My guess is it's in midair. Pakun remarked. The Suna shinobi all looked at each other and scrambled towards the second area unceremoniously, abandoning their posts. Temari would have stopped them, but they were long gone before she could give an order. Those fools are going to get themselves killed. The Akatsuki are not a group to be trifled with if they can even beat a Kage in his own element. Sasuke commented, and although a bit miffed at Sasuke's words about their shinobi, Temari had to agree. It was then that they began their search. As Pakun took point, Temari noticed that the path they were in was veering very little from the village. They could still make headway, but Kankuro's retrieval comes first. According to the mission parameters Shikamaru had shared to her, Kankuro was as vital as her to be in the village. 2 whole hours later, they had come across the part of the desert where they noticed a small pile of wreckage strewn around. Temari looked on, and she was quick to notice destroyed relics littering around the sandy dunes of the desert. A piece of them she could recognize as well. It was one of the head of one of Kankuro's puppets, Karasu. He's close. Pakun announced to the team. The winds blowing in the desert seemed to have been slightly distorting his sense of smell, but the scent never disappeared, it just that the scent was veering off along with the tumultuous winds in the desert, along with the fact that the mangled puppets seemed to give off faint and distracting smells that almost veered him off his range. But the scent strongest next to Temari was getting closer. It was getting to very easy to pinpoint now until they had made their way towards a large mound of sand, with a head barely out of being almost buried. Kankuro! Temari shouted. She rushed over to her brother as the others helped her pulling out the puppeteer from his untimely burial. Sakura kneeled beside the boy and her hand glowed green for her diagnostic jutsu. She could still see Kankuro's chest rising and falling, but it was shallow and it was a clear sign that he was going into distress. Diaphoretic. His extremities are cold and clammy, heart rate is tachycardic, rapid shallow breathing, he's going in and out of consciousness, coma scale, probably 13, checking his fingertips, noticing slow capillary refill time, congruent with a rapid but weak pulse, blood pressure is there but dropping slowly. He's going into shock. I'll need something to stabilize him before we move him. She then turns to her teammate, Sasuke-kun, I have a scroll in my pouch for emergency purposes. There's an IV set prepared for immediate resuscitation methods. I need you to unseal the contents while I establish a sterile field. Before we can move Kankuro-san, we need to keep him alive. Sasuke nodded and grabbed a scroll from Sakura's pouch and unsealed its contents, a number of IV bags, several small ampules, a hollowed needle, and an IV line. Doden. Dorodomu Earth Release. Earth Wall Dome. Sakura performed several hand seals and slammed her hands on the ground. Shikamaru instantly recognizes this as the jutsu one of the sound nin they had fought years ago performed. He turns to Sakura with a raised eyebrow. It seemed it wasn't just him that had a photographic memory. Sakura then raised Kankuro to a makeshift table made of earth, sanitizing the area around the puppeteer with some antiseptic that she had in her scrolls and immediately began her work. Is Kankuro going to be safe? Temari asked and Sakura shook her head as she established an IV line and immediately went full blast on her infusion with the IV bag. I can't say for certain. At this stage of the body's response, catching up to the damage done to him will be difficult. The first stage of treatment here is to administer emergency aid and stabilize him before rooting out the problem. My guess is that he's been poisoned. Judging from how his body is reacting, relative physical injuries are easy enough to solve because the cause is obvious. It's a different matter altogether when something is messing him up chemically. I'm preparing an infusion with some inotropes to help with the circulation just in case the immediate fluids aren't enough, but I'm going to have to keep monitoring him to see if there's an improvement. How long are we going to be here? Shikamaru asked, and Sakura scowled, as long as it takes. Once he's stable enough, we'll be able to move him to a better facility in Suna where I can perform a better diagnostic of his situation and what type of poison he's been inoculated with. So, they would be here at a minimum of at least 4 hours to over a day. Shikamaru estimated. 2 hours later, Sakura noted a change in Kankuro's vitals. It was subtle, but Sakura had noticed a better heartbeat. The arms and legs weren't as cold and clammy as before, but the blood pressure remained low. Gritting her teeth, Sakura broke a small ampule and extracted the fluid with a sterile syringe before puncturing an IV bag and pushing the liquid to the bag and began adjusting the infusion again. He's improving, but his blood pressure is still low. I'm giving him an infusion of dopamine, that way we can raise his blood pressure and move him sooner. Normally, Sakura would give the infusion in a much more strict sense, and she was risking of giving damage to Kankuro rather than aiding him. But in order to move him faster to a hospital, she would have to risk of doing this and try to make up to the boy as they make their way to the village. It was then that Kankuro started to stir. He flinched when he started to move. Pain racked his body as if he had crashed into a brick wall. His world was spinning, disorienting, even as he didn't know where he was or how he got there or what time it was. What happened? Temari went to her brother's side immediately. Kankuro. Don't move. Sakura is stabilizing you right now. It was then that Kankuro forced himself from the table and sat up. Or at least he tried before falling flat on his back and he grunted. Gaara. Akatsuki. Akasuna no Sasori. Temari froze from what Kankuro had just mumbled. Akasuna no Sasori. The terror of the Red Sands. Said to have destroyed an entire country with his puppets alone. The name that described the nightmares of Suna Shinobi had joined Akatsuki. Temari was then brought out of her thoughts when Konkuro's left hand let go of a piece of cloth. That piece of cloth happened to have the design of red and white cloud patterns, a sign of Akatsuki. Kakashi leaned down on the ground and let Pakun smell the piece of clothing. Though defeated, Kankuro secured something that could help in rescuing the cage, for that he has my respect. Pakun gave a nod. It's the same direction back in Kawa no Kuni. Pakun then turned to Kakashi. I'm going to assume that we're splitting up here. One group heads to Suna for the mission, the other is going to serve as backup for Guy's team. Naruto and the others can probably handle themselves, but it's nice to know that reinforcements will be there to support against Akatsuki. Kakashi nodded. Sasuke and I will be the backup. Mission parameters have changed. We need to stop Akatsuki with whatever it is they're planning with the cage. If what your nose is indicating, then that means that the Akatsuki members who took the cage have come to a full stop. Kawa no Kuni is probably one of their bases. To this, Sasuke paid full attention for Kakashi's words. Then we'll be heading to Suna. Shikamaru answered and Temari nodded. Despite Sakura's promise to Sasuke, she knew she was needed elsewhere and Sasuke understood. I'll be going with Shikamaru and the others. Hopefully, we can find the appropriate antidote for Kankuro. Kakashi gave a nod and Sasuke walked over to Sakura and patted her shoulder. I know you want to come with me. I can feel it in your actions. But you've chosen well to put another well-being's life in your hands rather than your own. For that, I'm assured that you can take care of yourself. If you manage to heal him sooner, I'm sure you will be able to catch up. With that, Sakura dispelled the jutsu and the earth dome crumbled all around them. Temari and Shikamaru carried Kankuro by the shoulders and the quartet leapt towards Suna, leaving Sasuke, Kakashi to head back to Kawa no Kuni. In case we do meet Itachi, Sasuke, are you mentally prepared? Sasuke looked at Kakashi for a second before he turned back his eyes back to Kawa no Kuni. Half of my life has been preparing for that moment, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at that moment, and what about the other half? Sasuke merely closed his eyes beneath his mask as he recalled the death of his family once more. Half of it has already died on the night of the massacre. Kakashi couldn't help but feel empathic to his student. He who had lost everything that night, much like how Kakashi had lost everything growing up. Kakashi swore to this day that he would not let his students live in the same fate as he did. He promised himself that he would give everything he had for his students. Undisclosed location, 2 hours before Kisami's attack. 10 figures stand on 10 fingertips of a giant statue, all of them except 2, showed an ethereal presence as a massive globe of chakra surrounded their victim. It was only the first day of their extraction and the Aikibi was proving to be a cumbersome task. When the leader of Akatsuki announced the technique, Genryukufujin, 9 illusory dragon heads sealing method, he announced to his members that the task was to be done in a full 3 days and 3 nights with no interruptions. All 9 members stood and performed the technique without much fanfare, and the one with the plant-like appendages spoke to the leader. 5 Konoha shinobi are scouring the country. They are most likely looking for the cage. One of them is the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. The leader seemed unconcerned, as if he already knew this would happen. The leader turns to Sasori and Deidara and then speaks to them. I would have expected Suna shinobi to have been the ones to go on find their cage. What I did not expect is for Konoha to meddle in their affairs. But nonetheless, there is no reason for concern. They have yet to find the general area of where this is. Only someone with enough sensory ability can pinpoint this current location, but this presents to us an opportunity. We will capture the Kyuubi Jinchuriki here and transport him beyond the blockade of Tokigakure and direct into aim. The leader looks at Kisame and Itachi and then commanded the two, Itachi, Kisame, lend me 40% of your chakra. We will deal with these rabble soon enough. Itachi and Kisame looked at each other and then back to the leader. With a nod from them, the leader accepted the chakra between the two and then looked back at Deidara and Sasori. Sasori, have your spies be ready. Sasori gave a nod. The puppeteer from Suna knew what the leader was planning and had Yura and Mukade come up front. I would have hoped that I didn't have to sacrifice more of my pawns for this game of yours, Pain. Good spies are hard to come by in our field of work. And you refuse to have some of your men be involved with your schemes. The leader refuted. That is because my men are still affiliated with my village. The less involvement we have, the better we keep our identities hidden. Sasori didn't find that answer enough of a justification, just like what you did in Iowa, I presume. The leader narrowed his eyes against the puppeteer. Iowa was a covert operation. What we did there was through years of planning and execution. Do not assume just because I went there myself means that I have involved my men in some way. We slashed our forehead protectors as a sign of being missing nin in order to establish to Onoki that we are affiliated to no country. Shinobi with no borders, hounds of hell that will cause mayhem whenever and wherever they see fit, an idea that most of the people who joined this organization liked for one reason or another, but Pain seemed to have something in mind other than what they were doing now. Sasori knew this. What he didn't know was the motive behind accumulating such ridiculous amounts of power. Sasori seemed to find ticking off the leader amusing, though, and pulling the answer out seemed to be second in requirement instead of this. And just how well is that going for you? Assuming control of Iowa, the only thing that you have done notable as of late is to be a thorn on the Raikage's side. I thought you wanted peace. And why inaction against Suna when we all know that if Iowa were to act now, then Suna would be finished? Pain didn't answer the man. He was not going to give the puppeteer the satisfaction of an answer. It was here that the lone female of the group spoke. In order to achieve peace, sacrifices are required. There must be a catalyst to which we can act. But in order to do so, we must require the 9 Biju as a show of strength. These 9 Biju have been used as deterrents to war. It was here that the members were looking at the female member seriously. Not a single soul spoke then. It was here that Conan continued. Quote. But even with those, the 5 powers has laid waste throughout the continent and laced our lands with 3 shinobi wars. A deterrent is merely used as a last line of defense for their respective villages. It is why even after all these massive wars and genocides, these villages remained standing. Their Jinchuriki system has prevented total destruction of these villages and the others are left to pay for the devastation the 5 villages had left. Pain then added, acquiring the Biju puts us in a power dynamic that would make the 5 nations wary over us, they will not raise a hand against us and we will be free to do whatever we desire. Having 9 of the Biju would scare the countries against Akatsuki more than strike against them, that was common sense. An organization that can destroy countries in a blink of an eye would make the 5 powers tremble in fear and they could fully use them as they want to with what Pain was planning to do. But that didn't mean that wars will end with what Pain was planning. Wars will just be fought without the safety net of a Jinchuriki. Something that would bring about a complete destabilization of nations from growing smaller to absolute destruction. And these massive beasts of chakra will now be used by the organization instead of the nations. Nothing will have truly changed by then. The only thing that will change is the amount of deaths. As Yura and Mukade neared the statue, 2 dragon heads made of chakra coiled their way towards the 2 humans and engulfing them. The leader's chakra traveled through to Sasori's henchmen. Yura and Mukade screamed horribly and writhed in agony before being consumed by Pain's chakra. Every orifice and pore that were on these 2 men lit up their chakra network flooded from head to toe with power as Kisame and Itachi's shared strength entered them both. Kisame will be handling the 5-man team, Itachi shall serve as his backup. He will be intercepting the reinforcements sent by either Suna or Konoha. And with that, from where Yura and Mukade stood were the faces of Itachi and Kisame. Kawa no Kuni. Since their separation in the country, Team Guy plus Naruto had been scouring the country as much as they could. It was here that Naruto took to the skies to see a bigger bird's eye view of the land and found nothing as of yet that could help him in their search. The main bulk of the search fell onto Neji's shoulders and he had been directing where to look and how to find them. It had been several hours and nothing of note was even remotely present. The team had gathered up to their base camp and the 5 of them had made their reports. So far, nothing came into mind. Guy gave a nod at them as he noticed that Tenten and Neji were looking a bit winded while Lee was on the ground sitting and leaning his back against a tree. It can't be helped and I'm sure some of us are tired enough after crossing fire country at top speed and making halfway in Kawa no Kuni. We have no choice but to put this search on hold for tonight or we would be too tired to face Akatsuki if we continue. I understand the urgency, believe me, I do. But in times like these, we have to be in our top shape if we are going to face them. All of them nodded at once and it was here that they began starting a fire while they began talking about the next step of their plan. This was the projected general direction according to witness reports from Suna's distress call. Missions like these depend on a certain level of luck if we have no clue where to look, but seeing as we have managed a good sweep of the area, we can expand our search to another area for about 10 kilometers from here and look there. We don't know what the Akatsuki plans for the Kazekage and the rest of the Jinchuriki, but before something dire happens, we need to put a stop to their plans. Naruto nodded as he looked at the campfire with a frown. The Akatsuki want the Biju, and there are multiple ways to extract them out of us. But that's going to cause problems, because once a Biju is extracted from its host, then the chakra of the host is sucked with them, the host immediately dies as a result. It just so happens that one of the Biju is in the Kazekage. Naruto gripped his hands tightly and his knuckles turned white. If anything, before they can even extract the tailed beast within Gaara, we're pressed for time as it is. My cage bunchen has been spread enough and still. Naruto-kun. Lee interrupted his thoughts and gave him a thumbs up. I promise you this, though Gaara was our enemy back then, though he may have almost cost me my dream and my life, the fact that he has changed is a testament of what our second chances give us. I was given a second chance if not for your work with Tsunade-sama, and you seem to give that second chance to him as well, and if not for your work, there would probably be hostilities left in between our two villages. I believe that your handiwork with him is what forged this strong alliance between Konoha and Suna, and we would wish nothing more than to continue this alliance forged not by paper, but by your bond with Gaara. If we were to lose him now, then there is no telling what will happen in the future. This alliance is still young, but we cannot let it die the way it is. That is why we have to save Gaara, and believe me, Naruto-kun, we will succeed if not for the village then at least to save a friend. And with that, Naruto seemed to calm himself a bit, letting a small smile escape his lips as he closed his eyes, hearing the voice of his predecessor. The power to reach out and the power to forge a different path, to not let the ideas of old take forth and destroy us. What a delightful thought, isn't it, Kurama? The nine-tailed fox scoffed at this. Let's see what he thinks once he figures out the whole truth. Asura looked at Kurama for a second and he could tell that something within the beast didn't quite impress him yet. Like the fox was hiding something more from him. Asura looked at Kurama pensively for a few more seconds before he turned back towards his host. For the first time, he sees Kurama actually looking something much more than angry, like somehow the creature was looking guilty, somewhat repentant. All Asura's thoughts changed, however, when he saw Kurama's ears twitch. Something is here, and it's going to attack. To the outside world, the 5 Konoha shinobi relaxing around the campfire remained still as they talked to each other. It was here that when Naruto heard the words of Kurama, he turned his head to where the Biju was pointing at and he scowled. The 4 were quick to notice. Just then, a huge wave of water surged high above the trees and onto them. The 5 Konoha shinobi dispersed from the campfire as it was immediately swallowed down by the crashing tidal wave that came out of nowhere and flooded the entire landscape. 5 shinobi then landed onto the surface of the water. Their feet made small ripples around them and they looked beyond to where the giant wave of water came from. A small chuckle escapes from afar and a man wearing the cloak of Akatsuki appeared, along with a giant sword wrapped in white cloth hefted on his shoulders. Naruto's scowl turned into surprise. The man's height and posture were familiar. The man then threw his straw hat away and a familiar sharp-toothed grin greets them. The man was standing tall with his blue skin and beady eyes, a figure so imposing that it brought memories within Naruto that brought chills down his spine. Good day, host of the Kyuubi. I see that you are presenting yourself willingly to our organization, this time. Did you perhaps have an epiphany? Neji looked at the man and then turned to Naruto, whose unease was present for all of them to see. I see, so this is the man that had beaten him down all those years ago. Although he doesn't show it, there is a sense of fear that clearly escapes him. Neji thought as he stared back at the man before them, their enemy's cloak billowing with the winds. Naruto then replied, forcing himself to speak, pushing the fears that had surfaced in him back down, sure. And I'm presenting myself with the way I've always wanted to, by skinning you alive and letting the real sharks feed on your corpse. You'll be wishing that you should have finished me, Kisame. Naruto remembered that name. How could he forget the one who had defeated him so completely? This was the man who not only nearly killed him, he was also the one who crushed his spirit and grounded it into dust. If it wasn't for his asshole of a benefactor, he wouldn't be standing here today to face the man in front of him again. Kisame smirked, impressed that even with his mere presence, the host was unafraid, and he chuckled, feisty little creature, aren't you? Though it won't turn into the way you want it to. Do remember that we left you for dead after doing nothing against us. A few years of training will not change that fact. It was here that Neji spoke. I'm afraid that you will be disappointed with that prediction. In fact, I suggest you be careful when dealing with us. What's this? A hatchling who thinks they can come toe to toe with the tailless beast. Kisame couldn't help but laugh at the notion. Oh. Are you seriously threatening me? Have you come to test me up close? He smirked as the 5 shinobi prepared themselves. Guy grabbed a pair of nunchaku with a design of 2 dragon heads each, as Lee decided to let go of his weights from his legs and grabbed a pair of tonfa from his pouch, with Neji activating his Byakugan before performing a peculiar hand sign that Kisame did not recognize. Tenten then raised her hand and pointed an open palm at Kisame, a gesture familiar to Kisame as Naruto grabbed a pair of kunai with his hands. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki noted that this team was not backing down. He had to oblige with their spirit. As it was, holding back against this man was not an option they were willing to do. Kisame grinned. A sense of excitement escapes him, battle lust running through his veins as he felt his heart beat faster than it did before. Then come as you like. Suna. Upon arrival of the group, Baki was quick to greet the envoy Tsunade had sent, and Temari had informed of him of what was decided on the way here. With the help of the Konoha shinobi, they managed to bring back not only Kankuro, but they also gave a general direction of where Gaara might be. Baki had escorted Konoha team with Temari to the hospital to have Sakura perform the needed procedures for Kankuro, and had all the medics that he trusted be around Sakura and Temari's brother, while Temari and Shikamaru followed Baki to an empty room within the hospital. A handseal later, Baki motioned for Temari and Shikamaru to relax as he began his briefing. I will not mince words. Temari, the elders have decided to place you as the next cage. Temari scowled at this. Baki, don't tell me that the elders want me to become the Rokudaime just because Gaara was taken. This proclamation means that they are assuming my brother is dead. Baki nodded his head. It's as you say, they are assuming his death now at the hands of the Akatsuki. The timing is suspect. I'm sure you know that Gaara is not as popular as he seems to the village. True. He may have prevented many more deaths this time around, but public perception has always been divided about him. Temari rubbed her temples. Was Gaara at least aware of this? People looking for his death. Baki nodded once more. Yes, and he has been keeping tabs of the people who are actively wishing for his demise, or at the very least, discredit him enough to make him leave his position. We have been aware of some unsavory deals and dealt with them accordingly, but never about Akatsuki. Shikamaru scowled at this. Baki-san, let me ask you, how long did the name of Akatsuki started circulating in the village? Baki answered, and he looked down, almost shamefully, close to how much word has gotten out of Konoha, mostly 3 or 4 years ago. Kankuro was tasked along with me to discover if any of our institutions have been compromised. We have discovered that the Yondaime cage, Rasa-sama had made a deal with Akatsuki, specifically with Orochimaru, to plot out the invasion on Konoha. It is also why both Temari and Kankuro received special training with Suna's greatest treasures. Once Temari has been sent as an ambassador, Gaara had quickly gathered Kankuro and I to talk and manage our security here. Shikamaru began to think about this, so give or take, less than a decade. With how active the village is right now in uprooting the problem, I would see how those in the circle would know Gaara's plans and his intentions on such. I would say your problem is rooted in too deep, that the elders are somewhat involved in the scheme, and that this incident isn't just Akatsuki barging at your doorstep and letting in 1 or 2 dangerous elements. Shikamaru was looking as if the matter was shallow for now, until he began to think. Can you give me a file of the elders for a moment, Baki-san? I want to know if there are any more motives other than disposing Gaara. There has to be more before this. I would not believe an elder is foolish enough to recognize their position internationally just to get rid of a person formidable enough to scare away almost any other shinobi. A deeper motive has to be present, perhaps something more. Baki shook his head at this. I am sorry, Naruto, an ally you may be, but those files are confidential for a reason. Baki. Temari interrupted her former teacher as she turned to the man and said, Shikamaru has my permission to see the files. Baki was frowning at this. The elders had warned him not to get too chummy with the people from Konoha, but it seemed even Temari was now affected. With all due respect, Temari, these things will compromise the village as it is now. Baki. Temari shouted this time, becoming testier by the second. The files. Give it to Shikamaru. Now. I'm the incumbent Kage and it is within my authority to allow Shikamaru to view the necessary files that he needs. We are up against an organization that has the ability to destroy countries and what have you. And you are here saying to me that even with all the necessary precautions that you, Gaara and Kankuro worked through, Akatsuki still manages to slip through the cracks by elements that dislike my brother. Forget all of this confidentiality, our village is in a crisis like never before. You will give those files or so help me. Shikamaru then placed a hand on her left shoulder as and looked like he was acting awkwardly. If it's any consolation, would it be okay for me to act like a consort or something? I understand that this may compromise your village, or that probably isn't enough. But the village needs help, Baki-san. Tamari needs your help. One of her siblings were taken away by Akatsuki that the higher-ups of this village is presuming dead while the other is literally on death's door as we speak. Right now, we are the only help that you can fully trust. Sakura, as they're treating your other student, Konoha has graciously lent you Tsunade's apprentice to solve this problem along with your staff. The least you could now do is completely trust me on this task. I swear, by our allegiance, I will never betray Suna's trust. Naruto is expecting us to do what is necessary and just. The name of Naruto resonates within Baki's memories. Gaara had spoken many times just how much he looks up to this person during the more quiet times and during the quiet musings of their cage. Thinking about his decisions and how this Naruto person would act brought forth a sense of understanding within Baki about Gaara, how he was soundly defeated by Naruto and how his rise to his seat of cage was due to this boy who had made a bridge to him even though it was through bloodied hands and fists. Even now, even with all the strength that Gaara had accumulated, the Yondaime Kage looked up to this person, a person who he would call a friend. Such a thing was out of the ordinary. Friends between villages. Since when did that happen? Since when did the monster that was once Gaara change so much that he had become someone who was deemed worthy to follow? Baki thinks this and recalls the time Shinobi of Suna began following him. Those too young to remember his former deeds looked up to the Kage and those with more open hearts, listened to him and believed in his change. And it all came from this one person, who influenced the Kage to trade his life for theirs. And what of the village? Were they really going to betray that person who took the blow meant for them? Were they really going to let him die? Were they really going to leave him? Discard him? Baki didn't seem to think so. Baki would give his life to the village as much as Gaara would. And with Gaara giving the ultimate sacrifice, for all of Suna to see, he felt like screwing every rule that the village had. Just for this one moment. Alright, I will give you those files that you need. And with that, Baki made his way towards the Kage's office. Shikamaru. Tamari trailed off and Shikamaru looked like he had just done something normal. Temari's blushing face said otherwise. What's the matter? He asked. Why you said something you shouldn't have. See consort. Are you mad? Tamari bellowed and Shikamaru looked confused for a moment until he remembered his words. The Nara fell flat on his butt just as Tamari slapped Shikamaru's hand away from her shoulders. Why you're going to take responsibility for this, you hear me? With that Tamari walked out of the room while Shikamaru gave a sigh before muttering. Me and my big mouth. With Sakura. A group of medic nin were huddled beside her as they peer into the procedure that Sakura was about to do. Kankuro, though still unstable, was sedated but with as little as possible. Sakura noted signs of fading in and out of consciousness. The brain must be working overtime and trying to send signals to every which way it was why even though these were concerning signs for a patient, the deep tendon reflexes were still intact, which meant it was functioning the way it should be, ruling out a powerful neurotoxin. Sakura had a scalpel ready as she went and carved 2 incision sites on different parts of Kankuro's abdomen. She could tell with chakra alone just which parts of the body the poison was strongest. This procedure of poison extraction was developed by Tsunade herself and she had taught it to her students for a time and many of those in Konoha's medical facility had learned how to do the procedure itself being part of its curriculum. As Sakura continued to cut beneath the skin and connective tissue, she commands one of the medic nin to grab a sterile basin with sterile water as she does her magic. A cloud of chakra, almost sticky in consistency appeared before her right palm and lets it dig through the incision. She could hear Kankuro screaming in agony as she told one of the medics to increase the dosage of the sedative. Sakura lets her chakra probe inside Kankuro's abdomen and with it, it began attracting the poisonous substance within his system. Sakura could visualize in her head that the poison coursed through the body via the bloodstream and the effect was mostly present on the liver, kidneys, and to her surprise, the heart and the lungs. With her other hand, she redirected the flow of chakra to catch and was caught with the free hand. Sakura then viewed her handiwork. There was at least 30 milliliters worth of black gunk in her technique as she placed the poison substance onto the sterile basin. She watched as the poison seemingly blended with the water and Sakura made a deeper frown. This is a water-soluble based poison, slow-acting, but almost untraceable. That cuts down our list of culprits in half. Prepare another basin, this time, an empty one. We know it's not a neurotoxin, this is most likely a poison that affects hematopoietic cells, which is probably why we are seeing signs of shock and acidosis, probably metabolic in nature in the patient. I'll need a vial of sodium bicarbonate to increase the blood pH levels, hook him to a ventilator for assisted breathing. No need for further invasive maneuvers, we'll do a blood transfusion, a pack of red blood cells will do, then list these following plants that you need. Sakura dictates the much-needed plants, plants to counteract the rapid degradation of blood cells, plants that help in stimulating red blood cells. The list was very specific and Suna had a plethora of herbal medications present in its biodome. Sakura then turns back to Kankuro and performs another poison extraction. This time, black gunk in her hands were much smaller. The fluid falls onto the empty basin, and Sakura sees that the poison settles slowly. She then performs one more poison extraction on Kankuro and only small blots remain. She sighs in relief and plops the poison down onto the empty basin once more as she performs the Shozen no Jutsu, mystical palm technique, and closes the incision sites she made. The medics were amazed that this teenage girl could perform such advanced methods for her age. It was here that an elderly woman had approached Sakura and said, "That was a very splendid work you've done, child. I would dare say that your work is as good as that slug princess, Tsunade." Sakura turned to look at a wrinkly old, graying-haired woman with age marks marring her face. She wore a black cloak that covered her entire being with a white muffler just beneath her neck and a peculiar-looking hat. Sakura felt awed at those words. "Thank you, I was personally trained by her, you see. And I hate that slug woman," the elderly woman declared as she ground her teeth out with Sakura's look turned from awe to surprise when she added that last part. Quote. "May I ask as to why?" Sakura awkwardly asked while the old woman only looked at her for a second and then laughed. "Well, aren't ya a well-mannered girl, totally different from that drunken hot-headed bitch." Sakura didn't know what to feel at that moment. She couldn't tell if she wanted to yell at this old bat or at least try to understand her. Anyway, just a fact that Tsunade was just better at everything she did concerning medical jutsu and the like over me just pissed me off. It's why I don't like her. The old bat declared, showing how petty she was over the fact that the slug princess had beaten her in her preferred field. Sakura was about to tell the old crone off when she noticed that the old woman slumped to the side and went motionless. "Hey, ma'am, get up. You should go too." The old lady gave no response. Sakura slowly reached out for her and tried to shake her to see if she had a reaction. Still no response. Sakura paled at this. This old lady might have just died for being too excitable. She was about to call for a team when the old woman started laughing like a maniac. "I was only pretending to be dead. Lady Chio." A medic sounded off. Sakura turned to the old bat, who she assumed as Lady Chio, and Sakura stood up and went for a respectful bow. "I am sorry about my presumptuousness. Please forgive me, Lady Chio." The old bat seemed to laugh it off as she said, "I'm just messing with you, girl. Truthfully, your work really has left an impression. It takes a certain art to have the eye of a good Iryo nin, and I think you are doing a fine job. Can't say the same for Kankuro, though." Sakura was surprised at this. "You know Kankuro-san, Lady Chio." Chio gave a hard laugh at this. "Ha. Knew him. I practically raised him as a puppeteer, ground his bones to ashes, I did. But fat lot that did to him. He chose his emotions first before getting knifed by an Akatsuki member. I thought I trained him better than that. Serves the boy right for going after his brother when he knew he had no chance. His brother is another fool, choosing to save this god-forsaken hellhole when his father shoved this place into ruin." Chio had a lot of dissatisfaction in her as she talked about the current generation of Suna shinobi. She looked absolutely dissatisfied with the way things were. "I don't think that's any way to talk about the people that are willing to put their life on the line for the village, Chio-sama. Sakura awkwardly replied and Chio scoffed. I don't have any problem with that. What I see is a bunch of fools who think it's fine to rely on the strength of outsiders solving our problems. I'm glad you made it here, girl, because you showed most of the shinobi here have become woefully inadequate. To this, the Suna medic beside Sakura looked down as she was being degraded by one of Suna's great elders. The old lady didn't even flinch as she continued. The history of the Kazekage has always been marred with a curse of an assassination plot against them. In Ross's case, he was a fool thinking he could trust Orochimaru with a plan. And now where is he? 6 feet under, with the rest of his spawn acting all friendly and taking an alliance a greater precedence over the development of the village as a whole. Sakura didn't like the fact that now the old lady kept badmouthing the people that were trying to bridge a gap between them. They had re-established their ties after the invasion, they had become allies worth fighting for. They shared so much and even established a friendship that went beyond mere alliances on paper. Chio looked down. A feeling of sadness escapes her that Sakura could clearly see. And now with his foolishness, the last Kazekage, with the power of his Biju, is taken without even any candor. It was a mistake in keeping him alive. Suna has lost its edge, now it's nothing more than a pitiful village demoted to being last of the 5 great powers. Well deserved in my opinion. And his foolish brother too just for acting on his own just to chase after a dead man. And what's wrong with that? Sakura suddenly asked. Chio looked back at the girl. Sakura looked like she had enough. What's wrong with relying on others to help you? What's wrong with Gaara? What's wrong with his siblings? What's wrong with being concerned for one another? Gaara was a fool. That fool almost killed us all because of the Jinchuriki system. He never asked for it and in turn, he was turned into a killing machine by his father. It was only because of Naruto that he could change, he saw something else than being a container. Gaara could change because Naruto chose to be his friend, he chose to change Gaara and pull him out of his pain, he made existing for Gaara bearable and you're saying now that it was a mistake to let him live. Sakura was now shouting, why are you a medic nin? You clearly see death as nothing more than a common event, not something tragic. Maybe this is why Shisho was better than you, she would have done everything in her power to save a life even to the brink of failure. Sakura-san. The Suna medic nin pulled her back just as Chio stood there, speechless. No, I can't take her words lying down. I won't have her smear the trust that Naruto and Gaara made. She doesn't understand one bit of what made this work. Sakura shouted as she was escorted out of the room. Chio-sama. The old lady turns to look at one of the medics and Chio scoffed. It seems like master, like a apprentice, a disrespectful one, that girl. But out of all the shinobi she had met, this was possibly one of the people that ever raised their voice against her. Chio couldn't help but look at the girl with interest. Gaara did not shout unless absolutely necessary, and Baki merely acquiesced to her words while Kankuro barely refuted any of her words whether neutral or filled with scorn. But this girl surprised her. This girl not only shouted at her but also questioned her abilities as a medic. Chio found it absolutely humorous. On the border between Kawa no Kuni and Kase no Kuni, deep within the sea of trees and other greens stood Uchiha Itachi. Around him littered corpses of Suna shinobi, all taken down with kunai to the throat or a shuriken rupturing an artery. The Uchiha waited patiently as he stood in the forest, not paying heed to the dead in his wake. We weren't expecting you to be this early, but I see that you are making quite the headway. There was hatred roiling within the person as he growled and gripped the sword on his back tightly, knuckles turning white as the person beside the man lifted up the forehead protector that concealed a Sharingan. Uchiha Itachi. Chapter 36. The First Encounter. Hatake Kakashi had been quietly thinking to himself as he and Sasuke made their way back to Kawa no Kuni with Pakun leading the way. It had been 3 years since his fight against Itachi and he remembered how outclassed he was in fighting against the killer of the Uchiha clan. For the longest time since Itachi's appearance, Itachi did not just made milestones, he had taken a huge leap forward. Being the former commander of the Anbu unit, Kakashi watched as Itachi grew, that unmistakable demeanor of the boy who had entered the most rigorous branch of the shinobi arts in Konoha was familiar to him. Cold, analytical eyes, Itachi looked on during brief missions as if he saw even farther than most of his peers. The older ones regarded Itachi as a boy whose limits have yet to be seen. The look that Itachi gave them, it was as if he was seeing past them and onto a horizon that many did not know. Kakashi could tell, This kind of mindset was familiar to him. So familiar that he could not help but be beside himself as he saw Itachi's unbelievable progress. And just as Itachi's light had shined brightly above, just as he neared Kakashi's summit, the elder of the clan head's sun suddenly faded and something of a proverbial twig snapped within. Kakashi could not believe the rumors at first. Itachi slaughtering his clan was a surprise that he did not expect. In one night, the Uchiha clan went extinct. No one was there that could have stopped him. Kakashi looks at Sasuke. The ominous shadow of Itachi still loomed behind his student. The man who committed genocide against the Uchiha, his cloud remained still with Sasuke, even after all these years. And Kakashi could not help but understand the rage within Sasuke. To have been left alone, to see the life of your parents violently snuffed out in front of you, and to be utterly betrayed by someone you trusted wholeheartedly, Kakashi lamented Sasuke's life. Sasuke truly still lived with the past haunting him. And when they saw Itachi, it was like a dam had burst. Sasuke spilled so much killing intent that it came off in waves as he saw Itachi. And the man was just standing there, as if he was taunting Sasuke, with that cold and emotionless demeanor. Kakashi could still see Itachi's gaze, he could still see how far he was staring off into nothing, as if in his bouts of madness, that faraway look still maintained with him. Still looking past me, you unforgivable cur. Sasuke shouted, and it was then Itachi turned to Sasuke. His eyes remained neutral and Itachi looked like he could not be bothered with his little brother. Foolish little brother. I can tell just from the way your chakra is running, you have gained access to the Mangekyo. I congratulate you for having reached that same level as me when I was a child. To this Sasuke growled, the Mangekyo Sharingan, this state is nothing but a cursed power, but if it means biting down at this curse to kill you, I have no qualms in doing it. Kakashi placed a hand before Sasuke, gesturing him to stop as the silver-haired Chunin asked the man before them. Knowing that he also contained a Mangekyo Sharingan, Kakashi had delved into its secrets and from what he could gather within Konoha's library. Tell me, Itachi, how bad has eyesight gotten? To this Itachi's face turned into a scowl. He supposed that Kakashi would know the backlash of using the Mangekyo Sharingan. Kakashi is a genius still that rivaled his own analytic abilities after all. Ho, you seem to know a lot about the Mangekyo, Kakashi-san. The secrets of the Uchiha clan was laid before you by my foolish brother. Sasuke looked at Kakashi with surprise as his sensei shook his head. Above all else, Konoha keeps archives of the Mangekyo Sharingan tracing back to the Nadaime Hokage's rule. Many of which were compiled after the Nadaime had them recorded as personal and secret files that Anbu and the Hokage had access to. Konoha has information about the Mangekyo Sharingan since the time of Nadaime-sama, you should know this, Itachi. Or has the blurring of vision ruined your sight so much that you failed to even find them? Itachi showed no response. Instead, he merely opened his cloak at the top and hanged his hand from the gap between the cloak. Not surprising, since the Nadaime was wary of the Uchiha and any of the Uchiha that died who had the Mangekyo during his rule were most likely autopsied by him to learn of the Mangekyo Sharingan's powers. The time for talk is over. Itachi. Sasuke charged, Sharingan flaring and the three tomo spinning per iris in his crimson orbs began to spin madly. With sword in hand, Sasuke zigzagged his way and performed the Waki no Kame as he ran hiding his blade from Itachi's sight. That's right, show me, Sasuke. Itachi silently watched as Sasuke with his eyes tracking Sasuke, never once nearing his sight. But as he got closer though, Itachi could tell something was wrong, as if there was a sudden phase of deceleration that he could see with Sasuke before the image in front of him blurred. An after image. Don't tell me. Itachi quickly turned around as Sasuke appeared behind him, sword drawn, with lightning crackling around his blade. That's Shisui's move. Itachi took a step back, avoiding Sasuke's swing upwards and quickly turned around to see Sasuke attacking with a downward sword strike. Itachi, knowing how Shisui's technique worked, decided to jump away at the last second as the attack missed Itachi by a wide margin. Shisui's attack was always several layers of feints in exploiting openings. The mirages he conjured made it difficult for his target to fully adjust to where he is striking. Itachi thought as Sasuke went after him again, vanishing from his sight again only to reappear to his left, which Itachi had blocked with his knife and a copied Sasuke's lightning-based technique to neutralize the Raiden effect of Sasuke's blade. Shisui's technique is quite the skill to have, my foolish little brother. But compared to his jutsu, Yours is still a fledgling. You are made predictable by the fact that you strike at me where I know I am being blindsided. Shisui did not strike with an opportunity, he created them. With that, Itachi effortlessly twists his kunai and parries Sasuke's sword, surprising Sasuke as Itachi raised his left leg and proceeded to kick Sasuke directly at his sternum. Sasuke was immediately sent flying as he was sent careening back towards the forest as he then began to perform a rapid pace of hand seals ending with the tiger seal. Kaden. Hausenka Sumabeni, Fire Release. Phoenix Flower Sage Crimson Nail. A flurry of shuriken charged with flame chakra escaped as they made their way towards Sasuke. It was here that Kakashi had intercepted the path between Itachi and Sasuke. With enough hand seal speed that could match Itachi, Kakashi finished his sequence and slammed his hands on the ground. Doden. Doryuheiki, Earth Release. Mud Flowing Wall. A slab of earth with 4 dog heads rose from the ground. The path of the shuriken stopped as it crashed into the earth wall. Kakashi was about to turn around and sure enough, 2 clones of Itachi had appeared beside his barrier with one of them speaking. An astute observation, Kakashi-san, you had foregone the use of the more obvious choice of using the Tsujinheki when you noticed the shuriken. However, Kakashi was suddenly pressed against the wall he made when one of the clones pushed forward with kunai in hand as Kakashi blocked with his own kunai, the blade pressing dangerously close to his neck. Akatsuki has not sat idle when you and your peers grew. It is not just you who has gained sufficient strength. The other Itachi then made a swift dash towards Sasuke as the younger of the 2 brothers recovered and deflected a kunai strike from Itachi, which came uneasily close to Sasuke's eyes. If you think this is the extent of you've already fallen for my trap. Itachi had cut Sasuke of his 2 fingers pointed to the youngest Uchiha. The sound of crows cawing and the flutter of wings escapes Sasuke's hearing and his world turned into an interesting shade of red. Team Guy vs. Kisame. Guy sprang up and down and began poking the water with the tip of his left foot. Feeling a good ease for his footwork, Guy did not even go into his stance and in a blink of an eye, crossed the distance between him and Kisame. I've taken point, Guy said as he stomped his foot forward, gathering enough force that the water beneath his right foot went downwards and 5 spouts of water erupted behind him as he swung one of his nunchakus forward towards the monster of Kurigakure. The force of the attack was so strong that even though Kisame had managed to block the attack mitigating any form of damage, Kisame was slightly pushed back. Push him out of his element. Guy heard Naruto shout and he grinned. It seemed Naruto had an idea about what he planned to do. Suiton users were very dangerous in their element, akin to how Gaara would nearly be unbeatable in the desert, a water user would be near invincible on a field he had advantage of. While it is true that a sufficient user you did not need a body of water to perform Suiton jutsu, the potency of a Suiton user increased once they are near bodies of water due to less time conjuring the necessary element and more time focus was spent on controlling said element. The exceptions of this rule did not only have a good ability to conjure up water from an otherwise clear battlefield, it was also to be as effective as those that were beside bodies of water themselves. Hence why the Nadaime Hokage was such a powerful Suiton user. Guy watched as Kisame started to get back up. Guy was about to go continue his assault but stopped when he heard something behind him. It was here that a streak of lightning went past Guy as another had dashed forward leaving Guy behind as Lee and Neji appeared beside Kisame, boxing him in. Neji was quick to react. Once Guy had attacked, he was already working as fast as he could. He had charged his legs little by little with his lightning chakra and observed that Lee had taken off his weights. Guy had performed his part and the two immediately sprang into action. Kisame was now surrounded to his front and his sides, with Neji about to close one of Kisami's tenketsu points while Lee was about to strike him with his tonfa straight to his left flank. Kisame did not even flinch. With a mighty roar and reflexes that surprised both Neji and Lee, Kisame spun around and swung Samahata sideways, effectively halting their attacks at him as Neji managed to dodge in time while Lee blocked the giant blade and sending him across the water field. It was here that Tenten made her presence felt. Kokuzo Bosatsu. Ju-Tetsu Dan, Boundless Space Treasury, 10 iron bullets. Several ripples from Tenten's left hand suddenly appeared sending 10 spears flying at Kisame. The monster of Kurigakure merely grinned and swung his Samahata forward, deflecting them all with a show of force. Kisame then stomped his left foot onto the water and 20 shark constructs escaped from his person as they all headed towards the 5-man team to take them down. Sweden. Niju Shokuzume, Water Release. 20 Shark Feeding Frenzy. The shark constructs all went for their targets in groups of 4. Neji countered and slapped his lightning-infused hand into the water with his palm open. The water around him burst into tiny bubbles and causing the water to crater several feet before being filled again. Before forming back up, the shark constructs beneath him dissolved instantaneously. Lee, with his feet, duct-weaved around the sharks, he then sees them now at a range where he can take them out in one fell swoop. Lee jumped into the air and the sharks followed. Lee activated his Kongosho, Diamond Way, and began breathing deeply. Senju Kanon, Thousand-Handed Guanyin Bodhisattva. The sharks were immediately peppered by Rock Lee's fists, hitting them all at once multiple times and unable to contain their forms. The water constructs were easily destroyed. Tenten had foregone with dealing with them enough as she tapped one of the 10 seals in her knuckles with the kanji of water and out came in her hands in a cloud of smoke Suiginto, Mercurial Blade. Pulling out the Nodashi out of its scabbard, Tenten raises her sword upwards and the water around her began to surge upwards at the tip. The 4 sharks that went for her did not stand a chance as the water obeyed the second jutsu that Tenten had placed in her sword. Saikaiken, Command of the Seas, Tenten thought. The jutsu that commands control of water to a large area around her, the core base of the jutsu that Suiginto had been given. The ability to bend the water to the will of the holder of Suiginto. It was a jutsu that she had discussed with Ryugamine after finding out that the second jutsu could send highly pressurized water to the enemy. It seemed like a waste to not just let the user manipulate water to what she wanted. She wondered just how specific many of the jutsu she had with her weapons, and most of them merely did one specific thing for each. With her arsenal, she has covered pretty much the 5 elements at her disposal and several trick weapons that she would rather not use so blatantly against her enemies. She knew she had surpassed herself many, many times over since her days as a genin. But for her to reach her goals, it still would not be enough. Her goal was to surpass Tsunade. And she will do it her own way. Here, I'm giving this back to you. Tenten shouted and brought the sword down and the water around her bended to her will as highly pressurized water made a giant wave towards Kisame at high speed. The surge of water was soon followed up with Naruto running just behind the giant slicing wave of water. Kisame made a vicious grin, shoving Samahata forward and going into a thrusting stance. Kisame surged the blade forward. The high-pressured liquid made its mark as the cloth of Samahata were torn to shreds, revealing the multiple layers of serrated blades beneath. The surging water was soon calmed down as the water splashed back on the ground unceremoniously, the chakra used absorbed by Samahata and the shark constructs disrupted and vanishing from the scale of Tenten's technique. Naruto made good use of his Kuokan Zengeki, space-cutting strike, and bisected the 4 sharks before they could even touch him. It was here that Naruto ran towards Kisame, his eyes now changing in color. Through the walls of water, Naruto had sprung through, throwing 2 kunai on Kisame and the blue swordsman dodged, letting the blades sail past him and grinned. Out of all the people in this current team, only 2 of them did not hold weapons to level the playing field against him. One of these is a Hyuga with extreme speed and reflexes that made him suitable enough to bypass Kisami's large range in mid and close range combat. But the blonde did not have a weapon with him that could at least provide protection against Samahata. Naruto appeared from the wall of water, right arm cocked back and aiming for a punch on his face, and Kisame was there readily knowing that the blonde was aiming for a punch. Kisame would nail him first. Kisame chuckled as he swung Samahata towards Naruto. At the range that the blonde was in, Kisame knew for a fact that he was going to connect first. Clang! Kisame stopped his train of thought when he heard that. With his mighty strength, the water reacted, and a huge spout of water escaped behind the blonde as it rose to 20 meters high. But Kisame noted something different. He had noticed that the teeth that Samahata had were not piercing the blonde's flesh, specifically, the left hand. Even at 40%, to have resisted him this much was commendable. Kisame then looked at the blonde. Orange pigments colored the eyelids of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, and when they opened, they revealed yellow irises with bars in place of pupils. Kisame noted that this Samahata did not seem all too thrilled with absorbing the boy's chakra like it did years before. This change might have something to do with it. It took Kisame only 2 seconds to realize this fact, 2 seconds too late when Naruto had blocked Samahata against the skin of the back of his hand and resisted the monster's immense strength. Hey, you're not really here, are you? Naruto asked him and Kisame smirked. Now what would make you say that? Naruto did not reply and merely parried the sword away from him as Naruto surged forward Kisame with speeds that could match Guy on a good day. Kisame was surprised at this as Naruto was already in the motion of punching him across the face. If Guy had enough force to stomp and let out 5 waterspouts around him, Naruto had now 10 as he stomped his foot forward, gathering the necessary force to increase the strength of this one punch. Naruto concentrated natural energy around his fist and let loose a quaking punch that could make Tsunade proud. Smash! Kisame was sent hurtling far from his original position, the water beneath him parted ways as the force of the blow sent him flying from the man-made lake and onto the makeshift shores as the ground caved in and entrenched the blue swordsman. From afar, the view of dust and debris sprouting out in a straight line was seen. Team Guy had gathered around Naruto, whose orange pigments were already disappearing from his eyes, as he said, "He is not out yet, that guy's way too strong for just one punch to take him out like that. I could feel his resistance still even with a large amount of natural energy I had put in that attack." "What do you mean that he's not really here, Naruto?" Neji asked and Naruto answered him, "There's a certain stream of chakra that is tethered to him, same as how I'm able to do this mode with one clone supplying me with natural energy from afar with a remote chakra transfer seal. It is still a work in progress, but I lessened the time needed to enter Sage mode. Anyway, that tethered chakra I told you about has Kisame's chakra and it is entering the system of the guy before us. It's certainly Kisame there, but it feels like he impersonated someone. A strange jutsu, for sure. But whatever we are facing, I'm sure we can handle it here if that was Kisame's full strength." Naruto shook his head. "That's just it, he may have Kisame's looks, mannerisms and jutsu, but it felt like it was only part of Kisame, like it's incomplete or something. I don't understand the specifics here for now, but that guy is not the Kisame we're supposed to know." It was here that Guy looked quite thoughtful for a second and then asked, "Naruto-kun, you said that something is tethering with that person, yes?" Naruto nodded and looked over the horizon to his left. He felt the chakra streaming to this man coming in from a certain direction. "Yeah, and I'm suspecting that is where we'll find Gaara." Naruto nodded at this and pointed to the general direction of where the chakra came from. Guy gave a nod and turned to his students. "Then that is where we need to go. Neji, Tenten, Lee, I am placing my trust in you as my students to help Naruto-kun in this expedition. I will be staying here and finish this fish man off. He's not at full power, Guy-sensei, but that man has managed to withstand most of our blows. Surely you don't intend to face him alone?" Neji asked and Guy gave them a thumbs up. "A mere copy of a strong man shall never withstand the power of my youth, Neji. You, Tenten and Lee know of what I am capable of." To this, Guy smiled at them and this time, power seemed radiate within Guy. In an instant, Guy had managed to open 6 of the 8 gates within him and noted the overwhelming feeling of the man's chakra. "Take care, my students, I will be following you shortly." With that, Guy vanished from their sights as the sound of Guy stomping on the water and dashing to the enemy left multiple waterspouts as high as 20 meters left his wake. Neji began to walk towards the general direction that Naruto had pointed out. "Let's go, this fight will be finished, anyway, and we are racing against time." Naruto, Tenten and Lee all nodded as they leapt towards their destination. They were getting close. Suna, Shikamaru had all the files he needed placed on the undisclosed room that they had used earlier. As Shikamaru ran eyes through all the papers that he was reading on, Tamari looked at Shikamaru concerned and paranoid at the same time. "If you're just going to stare, you should just help me sort and read through all of these files, Tamari. I understand that you're pretty paranoid about how Akatsuki managed to get through your security. But this is no time to concern yourself on what we're supposed to do but what we can do." Tamari nodded and Shikamaru handed her a file from the desk. It was here that Sakura was entered the room with Baku with Sakura looking quite annoyed. "Can you believe that old bat? The nerve of her calling Gaara and his siblings as fools while she was the one here who does nothing." Tamari turned to Sakura with a raised eyebrow at her foul mood. "I take it you've met with one of the more peculiar elders in the village." Baki nodded. "Not just any of the elders, Tamari, it was Chiyo-sama herself." Tamari nodded. "I kind of figured. The old bat is xenophobic and has been criticizing Suna's pivot for better relations outside the village. She should be thankful that the open trade between Konoha and Suna has been helpful in sustaining the village in some capacity." Coincidentally, Shikamaru was reading Chiyo's file. a puppeteer taught by the second Kazekage and a medic nin to boot. It says here she's a certain big shot within the council of Suna. Any motives that can link her to what happened? Tamari shook her head. She's certainly a staunch and vocal opposition against Gaara's policies, but she's never worded her dislike of the Kazekage himself. She acknowledges Gaara's strength in a way and even mentioned that he was a shinobi of great power. She won't certainly dismiss Gaara so callously to endanger the village itself, since she was the one responsible in placing the Ikibi no Tanuki on my brother. Having a clearer picture formed in his head, Shikamaru made a comment as he turned the paper for another page. She understands that the village comes first, no matter what her thoughts are on his policies. So, we can rule her out of the list. She's certainly loyal to the village, but her displeasure of all the good we've done between our villages despite the setback 3 years ago seriously pissed me off. Sakura said as she clenched her fists and growled. Shikamaru then turned back his attention to all the papers stacked at the small desk and began to rearrange them. By the time he was finished, Shikamaru had a taller stack of folders on the right and smaller on the left. Files on the right are marked as safe. Some of the council members here are either neutral to Gaara or favor him quite so. The neutral ones are more, since this is Elder Council we are talking about. They know about their rituals for Jinchuriki and know most of Gaara's deeds even before. They are either cautiously optimistic or outright terrified of what Gaara might do to them. The ones on the left are the much more hostile members, or a council member who has a relative that was killed by Gaara one way or another, making them have the perfect motive to do so. Tamari looked over one of the files on the left and flipped a page. Tamari was surprised to find even one of the elders she knew was a supporter for Gaara. But the rest, she had no idea that these people had the most to do with Gaara's supposed fate. She looked at one of the files, her blood boils in fury. These people were trusted very deeply by the previous Kazekage, who did not question him nor his orders. These were the same people that supported the Kazekage's decision to assassinate Gaara before, and they were still doing it, years later. How did this not get cleared by Baki, Kenkuro, and more importantly, Gaara? Now that we narrowed the search down, should we gather information on how they managed to maintain contact with Akatsuki? Sakura asked this and looked at Tamari, who she knew was the interim Kazekage, and then at Baki, the Kazekage's trusted right hand. No, there's no further need, get rid of them. Tamari answered hastily, her mind finally made up. Baki was surprised at this. Tamari was being much more unforgiving than the previous Kazekage combined. I realize that this has become a personal matter to you, Tamari, but you need to calm down. Tamari finished, spite filling her words as she gritted her teeth in anger. How can I, Baki-sensei? How can I do that when this incident not only abducted and possibly kill my brother, while the other one was put in a hospital by a highly dangerous criminal that we should have put down years ago? How can I, when I am forced here back against my own will to carry on a torch from my brother as if they are acting that he's dead? Do you want my opinion? My opinion says we need to get rid of Suna's bad elements for good. Sound good to you? Yes. Well, let's get to the killing fields then. Silence was her answer. All around her, her teacher turned subordinate by her current position, and the shinobi from Konoha all looked at her quietly, as if they were thinking of her decision quite thoroughly. A few more seconds later, Shikamaru craned his neck and nodded. For once, I think this may be our only option. Get rid of the bad apples and make sure that nothing like this happens again. Sakura then came to posit a question. How do we do that? They may oppose Gaara, but they may have a select few under their payroll. They have families as well. Some are as influential as any clan leader back in Konoha. Is wiping out a clan or two an option that we can have? Shikamaru looked outside and saw the bustling people around the main government building to where the Kazekage was supposedly working for today, but many people there were laying down offerings and prayers of safety for the leader that risked his life for the safety of the village. Inwardly, putting down clans in the name of stability was a drastic measure. But if they can make their families or vassals turn on them, then the damage would not be as significant. Suddenly, a plan starts formulating in Shikamaru's head. I have an idea, but this will cost the village somewhat. Shikamaru then went for the files of his list of suspects and then held them up. They say that a house divided cannot stand. Corruption bites deep, but it relies that you would not feel pain at first, but a village united for a common cause overcomes whatever adversity it might face. Shikamaru then looks onto Baki. Tell me, Baki-san, are your people good enough to dig up information that we most certainly need? even against three powerful individuals or clans that oppose the current Kage's reign. Baki nodded. It is well within my power to do so. Shikamaru grinned. Good, I'll need your men going undercover and find any evidence that could help us a great deal. We will use the people's adoration for Gaara against them. But in order to do so, you must be prepared to divulge this information on the masses, that three corrupt councilmen had tried to have Gaara assassinated. Shikamaru then turned to Temari. Don't get me wrong, Temari, a military dictatorship we might be, but politics still play a part on this issue. We have to make sure that everyone is with us for this plan to work or it shatters Suna's reputation as an organized and powerful military village. Shikamaru then gave the files to Temari. These people are dangerous. In a war, the acme of skill is recognized when we win a battle without having to raise a sword first. Temari understood what Shikamaru meant. She was going to use the people of Suna as her weapon. A grin crosses her face, with a dangerous glint in her eye. River Country, Kakashi and Sasuke versus Itachi. The sky had turned red, its shade was as dark as the color of blood. Sasuke's perception changed, as he was now surrounded by hundreds of Itachi's clones with a countless murder of crows perched on branches of a multitude of trees all staring at him with the Sharingan. Sasuke was trapped in a genjutsu and as his eyes started to pick apart the illusion, more and more of Itachi's clones began appearing and all staring at Sasuke with unmoving and unclear intent. My foolish little brother. One clone began as Sasuke turned to the source of the voice before his Sharingan instantly dismantled the genjutsu only to be replaced by another one. With just the tips of my finger, one Itachi had dashed to Sasuke with kunai drawn only for it to disappear with Sasuke's Sharingan spinning madly. I can cast as many genjutsu as I can. An Itachi clone had managed to get close to Sasuke, kicking him at his back, forcing Sasuke to stumble down and go on all fours on the ground. And with the power of my Tsukuyomi, Sasuke turned around and that Itachi became nothing more than static as Sasuke felt a clone pin him down on the ground. That I used on you when I put you in this genjutsu. Itachi then proceeded to stab Sasuke on the shoulder, as Sasuke yelped in pain. For Itachi it only took a second, but for Sasuke, it felt like an hour of having a blade slowly jammed to his skin. I can essentially alter the perception of time and space on my victim. Itachi then proceeded to pull the knife out slowly, causing Sasuke to let out a loud excruciating scream and trembled as his body processed that he was being stabbed everywhere. Inside his mind, the voice in his head laughed maniacally as he taunted Sasuke, look at you, down on the ground, eating dirt, while your brother completely embraces that power he was given. That power you could have used but refused to. Now here you are, defeated, unable to escape his illusion, unable to fight back, how pitiful. This sorry look that the man had as he looked entertained at his pain deeply angered Sasuke. This man dared to look at him with pity despite his amused-looking face, grinning at him filled with disrespect and denigration. It seemed more painful than what is Itachi putting him through currently. Another stab from Itachi and Sasuke could feel like liquid metal was being poured on him in every which way. Sasuke gritted his teeth as the pain continued. What now felt like hours seemed to turn into days. Another stab, and Sasuke screamed once more, and this time, Sasuke smacked the floor with his right hand multiple times, being forced to feel that pain once again lingering for hours in Sasuke's mind but a mere fraction of a second in Itachi's illusion. Sasuke gritted his teeth and looked back at the Itachi that was pinning him onto ground and found out that he couldn't dispel it. It was here that Sasuke saw Itachi's Sharingan had changed into the Mangekyo. Sasuke couldn't help but stare into those eyes, and as if on instinct, Sasuke's Mangekyo Sharingan flared to life, corresponding to Itachi's very own, and Sasuke stared hatefully at his own brother. So this is your Mangekyo. Before Itachi could finish his sentence, the world around them shifted in color from red to black and white, like a negative film clip that started from Sasuke's very own eyes and spread completely outwards. All around them, Itachi and Sasuke's perception has changed, the sky had turned blue once more and color returned to their faces. In front of Sasuke, Itachi looks at him, a new emotion plastered on his face that replaced his stoic demeanor. This one, now one of surprise. Tsukuyomi was cancelled, beaten, nullified. Words to describe what just occurred, a phenomenon that not even Itachi could fathom. Even those with the Sharingan, Tsukuyomi was a genjutsu that was nearly impossible to beat. The altered perception of time and space disorients the victim to the point of erasing a concrete form of perception itself entirely. But Sasuke's Mangekyo Sharingan had totally shattered Tsukuyomi. It did not just bring it down to its knees, it completely shattered it. This was something worth looking into. Sasuke kicks his brother away, rolling backwards on the forest floor and getting up, a snarl on his face. Seeing this moment of opportunity, Kakashi struck as he felt Itachi loosened his hold on him and swiftly dove underground with the Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu, inner decapitation technique, and quickly surfaced behind Itachi with hands already finishing his set of seals. You've completely underestimated me, Itachi. It was then that Kakashi's body was now surrounded by purple lightning and aimed to fingers at the clone. Raiden. Shiden lightning release. Purple lightning. The clone bursts upon impact, purple lightning piercing its chest and then through the stone wall behind it. The attack was so fast that not even Itachi's Sharingan could register when it had hit. Mangekyo Sharingan now activated, Sasuke crouched down and prepared for his run, sword discarded on the forest floor. Sasuke ran at Itachi like a mad dog from hell. It was here that Sasuke disappeared from Itachi's view, his visage waxing and waning as he approached. With his own Sharingan, Itachi was quick to react with Sasuke appearing to his left with a punch ready to his face and Itachi reacted accordingly, only for Sasuke to vanish once again, his being bending and waving as he disappeared once more. Sasuke then reappeared behind Itachi, in mid-spin as he was about to introduce his foot to his older brother's face. Once more, Itachi reacted accordingly, putting an arm up to block the kick that was aimed for his head as he had no time to dodge. Only to once more vanish again like a specter and this time, appearing onto Itachi's left with hand seal ready. Itachi's left index finger twitched and pointed at Sasuke but the younger of the two disappeared in a blur now, and Sasuke was already to his front, with hand now charged with lightning, momentum hitting its peak as he shoved the lightning-enhanced hand straight to the chest. Itachi had not even heard the distinct sound of 1,000 birds chirping as Sasuke shoved the Chidori straight to his chest and piercing through all the way to his back. Itachi gave out a grunt of pain and a small smile escapes him as his mouth bled and soon, the grip of the impersonation jutsu was ending. But he had known enough. He had successfully done his part of this mission. Sasuke was surprised when the image of his brother changed to that of an unknown man with a headband from Suna. Blood escaped from both his lips and his chest as Sasuke pulled out his arm and wordlessly laid the person to the ground. Suna Shinobi. Were they the ones who came here earlier? Kakashi had managed to catch up to him and saw what Sasuke had done. He looked down and saw that it was indeed a Suna Shinobi, but he knew that they had fought the real thing earlier. It had just about as much of Itachi's abilities and quirks down to a letter. So then, how is it possible that such information just happens to slip through their senses? The more Kakashi thought about Akatsuki, the more serious they become as a threat. Kakashi looks at Sasuke wordlessly and sees him silent, cleaning the arm that he used to shove in some random man's chest. Sasuke looked none too pleased that his revenge was taken away yet again. A little more incensed that someone else had to die just for Itachi's shadow to creep up on him. Your power, interesting. It seems I have to look at your growth more than I should. Sasuke looked displeased even more. You can go fuck yourself, Indra. Yet, there was a glimmer of hope that reached out to Sasuke. He managed to harm Itachi for the first time since their last meeting. The night of the massacre left him a mess, the day of Naruto's capture and near death drove him to despair. All those times, Itachi had destroyed him without ever touching him. But now, Sasuke knew that he was near, as if he was an arm's stretch away from his brother. He just needed to continue his pace. If Itachi's use of the Mangekyo Sharingan was any indication, Sasuke could very well catch up to him sooner rather than later. This thought crossed his mind and Sasuke seemed a bit more satisfied than earlier. At least he now knew how close he is, and it will only be a matter of time. The scent we are tracking has come to a full stop, approximately 2 hours away from here. Pakun had reappeared. Kakashi and Sasuke looked at the small dog and began their trek once more towards their intended destination. As they left, a crow silently watches them from the perch of a tree. With Naruto and Team Guy, it took them an hour and a half to get to their destination and finally, they made a complete stop towards a cave sealed shut with a giant rock at the mouth of the cave. A giant seal was plastered at the face of this rock. It looked deceptively simple if one were to only take a glance, but this was a seal that was much more complex. There were subtle hints that Naruto could take notice, like how the paper used to inscribe the seal with was still pristine, with no blemishes, creases and dirt seen on the sealing tag. But Naruto could also make out small writing overlaps that stretched beyond the sealing paper. It was faint, but just like the seal he had found in Izumo, this one was no different. Analyzing the seal was out of the question, time was of the essence. Naruto grabbed the handle of Minato no Banbutsu, the seal placed on it started burning up and consumed as the purple rope untangled by the Tsuba and releasing the blade. Naruto then unsheathed the wakizashi, the blade glistened by the sunlight. Neji and the others watched as Naruto pointed the blade directly at the seal. Chakra saturated at the tip of the blade, Minato no Banbutsu complied, sensing a seal that its owner was pointing to. Wisps of chakra then escaped the blade and back towards the blonde, as 5 circles of sealing matrices began forming in midair and around the blade, spinning in opposite directions from the circle before it. Begin. Seal structure analysis and decoding. The seal before the team started glowing slowly. Naruto then remained still, letting the chakra flow naturally towards the seal, and the sword began to do its work. Seal structure analysis, ongoing, revealing redundancies in seal defense. With those words, the seal matrix that made the main sealing on the rock began to appear, spreading in 4 cardinal directions. Neji, Tenten and Lee watched in fascination as one by one, the swirling 5 seal matrix rings surrounding the blade stopped, first at the tip and then those that followed right down to the ring near the base. Then, Naruto turned to his upperclassmen and spoke, "Once the seal is deconstructed and removed, you guys have to destroy that rock immediately." It would take a few more minutes to remove the seal, but those precious minutes were much less time consuming than to manually remove the seal and its redundancies or whatever trap was laid with them. With a flick of his wrist that was holding the sword, Naruto twisted his hand in a counterclockwise motion and in a 90-degree angle, as if gesturing of turning a key and unlocking a door. Begin seal degradation process. Minato no Banbutsu complied. The blade glows as a beam of chakra went straight to the seal. And slowly, the chakra began to spread to the matrices that appeared in 4 cardinal directions and glowed once more with Naruto's chakra enveloping them, and slowly, the written words began to contort and spasm. His chakra had reached to the far corners of the seal in record time, and these matrices that lined up the 4 different seals up north, south, east and west began to glow as well. Naruto's chakra detected a trap, but the chakra that Naruto imbued overpowered the seal trap as it began to degrade the outer matrix and onto the main sealing core itself. Back at the quartet at the mouth of the cave, the sealing lines that were made up of the matrix of the seal itself slowly began to dissolve, the seal on the large rock began to glow and seconds later, started to peel off. With a command, Naruto shouted to Lee, "Now, Lee. Remove the seal." Lee nodded and did so as he jumped and peeled the seal off manually. Naruto then turned to Neji and Tenten, who nodded. Naruto nodded as well. Now they knew what to do. A shadow clone appeared beside the blonde, taking his position in place and sat down before performing a set of hand seals and then aiming his palm at the original. Natural energy gathered around the clone and multiple seal lines began appearing around the clone's body and on the ground he sat on as he then channeled that natural chakra towards the blonde. This was the solution he came up with using Sage Mode. A way to reroute natural energy towards the original on an indefinite amount of time if he maintained his range. The transfer of energy remotely was not as wasteful as having clones as a stockpile that limited him to only 3 shots with only a certain amount of time, 4 if the original also entered Sage Mode. Training with the toads, the fundamental aspect of remaining still was part of what will always remain as the point of achieving Sage Mode. It took him time to gather natural energy, there was no denying that. And that alone remains as one of the weaknesses of Sage Mode. Maintaining Sage Mode was also another problem. Naruto was limited by not only time but also usage of this new power-up. Sage Chakra was finite in him, and he needed to gather more natural energy for his more powerful jutsu. Which also narrows the time he has use for it. It was cumbersome for Naruto, but with this method he developed on his own, he eliminates those weaknesses. He just has to remain still for just a second for the natural energy to mix with him as his clone supplies him with natural energy constantly. It was like being attached to a plug with a long cable. And as long as he can maintain Sage Mode, he would not need to stockpile clones, and if he needed to be out of range, the clone could just move and maintain the distance to maintain that connection. It would have helped if he had someone like Fukasaku or Shima were there by his person to not let it be a bother so much, but he supposed that beggars can't be choosers at this point in time. Once Naruto gave them the go signal, Neji activated his Byakugan and Tenten let loose a hail of metal wrapped with explosive notes, and a cascade of explosions occurred, hitting the rock and destroying it in 3 seconds. With that done, Neji activated his Byakugan and activated Denko Sekka, lightning speed, and charged right through the smoke to take point. He was soon followed and flanked by Lee and Naruto, with Tenten taking the flank. Their focus was to rescue Gaara. Neji, being readily available with his speed, would be the one to get their objective. Naruto and Lee will be the ones to intercept Gaara's captors and distract them. It was at this point that Naruto, now in Sage mode, was suddenly bombarded with something wrong in his senses. "Stop!" he shouted, and Team Guy looks questioningly at the blonde who was staring up. They followed their peer's vision and looked up as well. 12 different chakra signatures, with 3 that he could recognize, but those were dwarfed by something unsettling in the pit of his stomach as much as he did with sensing the one-tailed Shukaku. 9 individuals, 7 of them were nothing more but static, with 2 of them being real. They were all staring at them as they stood on one finger of each to a hellish-looking statue that was looking like it was in agony with its mouth open. No, this statue didn't look like a statue at all, but more like a gigantic husk of a being. From the very depths of it all, Naruto was sensing chakra, and it wasn't faint, but it remained in static. The chakra was recognizable as the Aikibi, but there was something in there that unsettled him. Something that he couldn't tell. But it seemed to shake Asura and even Kurama to their cores. "No, the Gedo Mazo!" Asura cried out. His father had told him of the tale of his ancestry once, and how this statue was supposed to have been sealed beyond the reach of anyone. Only someone who had intimate knowledge of the Rakuto Sennin would have known where it was. "This is dangerous. We need to destroy that statue before these humans manage to complete what they're trying to achieve. The Gedo Mazo means a catastrophe for all of us." "The Gedo what now?" Naruto asked. That unsettling feeling turned into curiosity and somewhat fear. If these 2 ancient beings can recognize and look scared out of their wits upon seeing this thing, then it sounded like this thing was something to be terrified about. It seems that the redundancies we set up for this ritual to not be interrupted was dismantled. "Kisame, I had hoped that with more chakra you were willing to share, it would have proved to be enough to stop them." The one who stood at the left index finger spoke, his rippling, striking eyes turning to Kisame, who was grinning from ear to ear, but from the Gentoshin no Jutsu, human lantern technique, it was hard to tell. Kisame replied, "We didn't expect as much growth from them now. They were mere chicks when we first saw them, genin, as it were. But 3 years is a short time to see such a leap coming from a prosperous village. Adversity is what shapes humans. You'd do well not to underestimate the determination of people." Red Sharingan eyes then turned to Naruto as he spoke to his leader. "Not before the eyes of God," said the apparent leader. He then turns to the only 2 members present at this hideout, Deidara and Sasori. One of the people standing on one of the fingers looked terribly annoyed at this. The man stared at the leader for a few seconds but decided to let go. He was not going to mess with the man that managed to subdue him without difficulty. "Capture the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, kill the rest." Sasori gave an annoyed grunt. The puppet master griped at this. "Great, more work from Pain. What about the ritual?" The apparent leader, now designated to be named as Pain, merely pointed to the statue. Naruto took a good hard look at the man, even if his image was distorted. Purple eyes with a rippling pattern. Asura and Kurama all looked at the image and were surprised. No words can leave their mouths. Nothing they could say would be worth it for now. There will be other avenues to finish this. We are almost done, anyway. There is little chakra left from the Jinchuriki here. Bring it to the hideout that I will tell you once you finish this. Naruto lowered his gaze. What he saw made him seethe with rage. In the middle of the sealing ritual lay Gaara, motionless, dropped immediately as the ritual was suddenly stopped. Not even any form of respect was given to him. To Akatsuki, it sounded like he was seen as a mere object. Naruto, after a long while, was now filled to the brim with hatred. He had seen people being treated like discarded items after they served their purpose. And to see Gaara be treated like a mere object for their goals did not sit well with him. He was outraged. These people, no, they weren't people, they were monsters. Gaara is not a toy to be messed with. You motherfuckers are going to pay what you did to him. The Kyuubi's chakra was leaking. His emotions were getting the better of him. All those years of being trained how to calm down were vanishing in seconds. His eyes, yellow with the use of Sage mode, changed in color to red. Slits began forming in the middle of the bars as Naruto's features turned much more feral. The nature energy within him was going haywire, forced to adjust to the influx of Biju chakra. Deidara merely gave a mirthful laugh. The mad bomber then jumped down just in front of Gaara's unconscious form and with the utmost disrespect to the Jinchuriki, sat down hard on Gaara's stomach with a finger taunting the blonde as if telling him to try. Come get some, Kyuubi Jinchuriki. The Gedo Mazo then disappeared in a giant cloud of smoke as the silhouette of the remaining 7 people vanished along with it. Smoke filled the cave. A vicious cry was heard with Naruto charging through the cloud of smoke and Neji was too late to stop the blonde. Naruto. No. We don't know what we're up against. Deidara smirked. He had laid spider bombs just as the smoke surged forward. The Jinchuriki would step into a field of landmines before Naruto could touch Deidara. Explosions were heard continuously within the cloud as Deidara laughed at the fool's decision to charge at him without ascertaining the terrain first. Beside him, Sasori slowly walked to him, and the puppet master observed. There were still multiple explosions occurring. Surely it should have stopped by now with the Kyuubi Jinchuriki having blown his legs off from Deidara's actions. But that was not to be, because out of the cloud of smoke, Naruto emerged with hate-filled intent. In his hand was a Rasengan but this time, red in color, and the bombs that were supposed to dismember his legs seemed to not work on him. What the F? Deidara could not finish that sentence as he was slammed with a Rasengan on his chest and in less than a second, Naruto detonated the jutsu, sending Deidara flying away spinning rapidly in midair. Naruto turned to Sasori, who used his tail to swing at the blonde but in a precise moment that Sasori could only describe as how a Sharingan user could, timely evaded his tail swipe even with low visibility and Naruto charged at him at an opportune moment with fist cocked back as Naruto aimed to decapitate Sasori with a Sage Mode enhanced punch. Sasori, who had the reflex of any S-rank shinobi would have, had managed to put up a hastily formed defense with his right wooden arm that shattered upon impact. Sasori was suddenly sent flying back. Naruto managed to calm down as he went back to Gaara, looking for any signs of life. There is a pulse. Asura said this and Kurama nodded. There is still a chance to save him. Naruto turned to Kurama, eyes wide open, in shock that Kurama seemed to be giving him information for his sake. Jinchuriki are humans that are connected to the chakra of their Biju. Their system relies on the chakra because of a forced introduction of our chakra into their bodies. The moment we are ripped from the host, we take with us the chakra that our containers possess, essentially dropping their chakra to zero. Kurama turned to look at his container who was wordlessly looking desperate by the second as the Kyuubi no Kitsune then pointed to himself. Some of Shukaku's chakra is still with me. Right now, your friend has only but the essence of Shukaku left within him. If you introduce the chakra left behind by Shukaku to him, the body will kickstart its own production of chakra and will recognize Shukaku's presence to kickstart its own production of chakra as well. Naruto turned to look at Gaara and mind already made up. Naruto dug deep into his person, into his own chakra and found the presence he was looking for. With a nod, Naruto kneeled beside Gaara and his right hand glowed with power before he slammed it on Gaara's stomach. The first few seconds nothing happened, and then the slow breathing pattern began to form. Gaara was displaying a chest rise without much trouble. Naruto sighed in relief as he let go of Sage Mode for now, cutting the link to the outside clone as he leaned down and began to carry Gaara. Naruto thought that they were safe now, a big mistake on his part. A few seconds later, a giant clay bird appears just beside the blonde and proceeded to grab Gaara by its claws and swooped away with the cage in tow. The smoke then cleared, and he saw Deidara with his cloak in ruins, narrowly escaping his fate from being blended into nothing and now escaping through the entrance of the cave, passing by Team Guy and having cleared of any obstacles in its path. Naruto growled and soon began giving chase. Team Guy was about to follow, but there was a disturbing sound coming from somewhere within the cave. They turned around, and saw Sasori walking towards them. Loud clicking sounds were heard as they saw blue chakra lines forming on his damaged wooden right arm. That insufferable brat, ruining Hiroko like this. I will make that boy pay. Small little claws then began extending from the wooden stump on its arm and chakra strings began sprouting from them multiple times, grabbing the destroyed fragments of his right arm on the ground, before the small chakra strings pulled them back and the small pincer arms on the stump began to repair the damaged arm as best as they could. Sasori then brandished his left arm, with multiple cylinders of ironwood popped out of the arm and aimed it at Team Guy. But first, I will have to deal with you three. Sasori was angry, and he was going to vent his anger at these three children who associated with the boy that ruined his favorite puppet. And then Sasori fired the cylindrical tubes from his arms, and each of them changed their vector as these objects honed in on Team Guy. Scatter. Neji commanded, and the two behind him did as they were told. The missiles that Sasori fired all landed from where they stood and exploded upon impact, letting loose a purple mist in the process and spreading outwards. Team Guy were at a safe distance from what the poison smog could reach, but it was at this time that Sasori had managed to repair the right arm, but it was not the same as it was before. Instead of having the same function as the left arm, this arm let out his poison in a more direct manner. Poison dipped Sanban. Perhaps the dose would not be as lethal but enough to incapacitate for the main weapon to do its job, his tail. Sasori brandished his newly restructured arm from his destroyed one and aimed a small tube of about half an inch wide popped out from the forearm, and the fingers on said arm began rattling and clacking menacingly as the tube that popped out earlier began firing Sanban at an unprecedented rate. Ratatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatatata. The sound goes, as Sasori let it loose in a twitchy manner, almost spreading the hail of Sanban in a cone-like fashion. As soon as the right arm was aimed at them, Tenten prepared herself and stepped in front of Lee this time, now with Tsukishiro that materialized in her hand. She commanded Lee to stay behind her as she told Lee to get low while she crouched, as well as her shield endured the barrage of poisoned needles that merely bounced at the glaive-turned shield. Neji performed the kaiden and deflected the needles. Sasori clicked his tongue disdainfully. He had expected the Hyuga to have mounted a defense, but not the other one that provided defense for her teammate. He supposed that he would come about in a different approach. From any standpoint, one would expect for Sasori to be slow and bulky. The humpback has never shown any feats that would alert them of any form of mobility that Team Guy could overcome. But that changed when the team heard a rip of clothing coming from Sasori as 6 mechanized legs had sprouted from the Akatsuki member, now revealing of what was underneath the black and red cloth. The man was on all fours, with 6 additional legs that was used for additional mobility. The hands were supplemented by the gauntlets that he had shown earlier. This time, the obvious humpback earlier was made out to be a thick shell that covered Sasori's back with the shape of a face with its mouth agape. The large prehensile tail came from the mouth of this structure that hovered just above the puppet itself. Tenten was looking closely to every feature that their enemy had, and many of the parts and functions of this shinobi had reminded her of something. This is a puppet, she concluded. She had seen a puppet user before, and this seemed like it was no different. Hidden weapons beneath its person, and weapons dipped in deadly poison at that. This person reminded her of Kankuro. There was no doubt about it. By the way this person operates, the fundamental use of such hidden weaponry in an unusual weapon made it clearly known that they were fighting a puppeteer, one from Suna at that. The question remains, where is the puppeteer? Tenten looks at Neji while she and Lee were behind her shield, and Neji understood at once. Find the puppeteer. Byakugan flaring to life, Neji's eyes probed around the cave, expecting to find chakra strings only to find none. His attention turned back to the puppet. He couldn't tell exactly what was happening, but he could see a mass of chakra in the form of strings fanning outwards to different parts of the puppet, but he could tell there was more than 10 of them. It was strange, the Kugetsu no Jutsu's chakra threads were mostly limited by the number of a puppeteer's fingers. It was said that the most skilled puppeteers could control a puppet with just a single chakra thread. But this one had at least double that amount, which told him that this puppet had more hidden features, and that to operate it properly, there were several support mechanisms inside designed to uphold the main features of the puppet itself. The puppeteer wasn't hiding someplace else, the puppeteer was concealed and protected by the puppet itself. The puppeteer is inside that thing, Neji claimed, and wordlessly began counting the chakra threads with his Byakugan. Thus, Neji tasked himself to discover the weapons layered within the puppet and hopefully drag the puppet master out. That means we have to destroy the thing to stop the puppet master. Lee mentioned as Sasori began crawling towards them in erratic fashion, much like how a real scorpion was approaching its prey. I doubt you can even touch Hirako. Sasori mentioned as 2 crescent blades popped out of the right forearm, curved inwardly and dripping in poison to pincer Lee. Tenten threw Tsukishiro at the monstrous puppet, forcing Sasori to block with the pincer blades as the glaive bounced out of Sasori's weapon. Tenten then tapped 3 seals onto her gloves. Kokuzo Bosatsu. Akasazume, Boundless Space Treasury. Autumn Sand Rain. A polearm materialized around her in a blink of an eye. Quickly grabbed the naginata to her right and twirled it above her head as she pointed the tip of her spear at Sasori. Tenten then thrusts the weapon at the puppet, who merely jumped back. Sasori knew what the girl was trying to accomplish. She would be using her naginata to gain enough distance that he couldn't get in as close as he can. The puppeteer glares at Tenten, and then with a clack from the puppet, the mouth of Hiroko opens, revealing another cylinder that looks as much like the previous one and aimed at her. Tenten, recognizing what Sasori was about to do, twirled her naginata once more and began to gather the wind around her. Turbulence began to pick up, the winds howling inside the cave as Tenten kept spinning the naginata above her. As Sasori lets loose a barrage of poisoned needles once more on her, Tenten used the wind to deflect and cut away at the senbon thrown at her. If annoyance ever showed its face to Sasori, then it was not obvious, as the puppet wordlessly began its approach once more, only to be met with Neji, lightning crackling around him as the Hyuga strikes the left arm with a lightning-infused palm. The plasma surges downward, piercing the left arm gauntlet and shattering the weapon upon impact. Sasori growled inside Hiroko as he then swung the massive, poison tail above him to at least scratch the Hyuga, and just as he was about to hit Neji at the last second, said Hyuga reacted instantaneously by going above the tail and striking the middle of it with an air palm, forcing the tail down and somehow creaking from the force of the blow. The lightning pierces the tail, but once it hits the back of the puppet, only the clothing covering the back was burnt to a crisp, as the material underneath it did not seem to be affected, if at all. Neji studied his blows to the puppet. Earlier, it showed that one of its features is the ability to self-repair by a system installed in between the armaments that it had. He was sure that the small miniature claws that went into fixing the tools on Hiroko was not just limited to its arms, it had to have been spread out and had flaws in its system. Neji watched as the threads inside the puppet began shifting. Neji then jumped away just as he landed the second blow, but his attention maintained on the threads inside as Hiroko's systems began repairing the damages done to it. There just had to be a limit for the who puppeteer can do with all these intricate systems in place. For each thread, there had to be a limited function on how Sasori could maintain such a complex puppet. Then, he notices something, a tiny sliver of change seen in Sasori. The damage that Sasori received on Hiroko was not as extensive as Neji had hoped. But something about such a trivial thing for a puppet like Hiroko made Sasori ponder to change his approach. One by one chakra threads began changing places, no doubt trying to repair the damage that he dealt with earlier. As the puppet fidgeted and spasmed in the floor, it was here that Lee decided to complete their objective. Activating Kongosho, Lee immediately made a mad sprint towards the puppet. With Sasori working overtime to repair his puppet, he immediately noticed Lee about to strike him down. The puppeteer had managed to move the right arm of his puppet and tried to pincer the taijutsu user with his blade claws, only for Lee to vanish at the last second. Sasori then saw two of his target gliding on both sides before Sasori felt several blows to the left of Hiroko before being sent flying and on, shattering the legs. Sasori wasn't done yet and decided to fire two of the left gauntlet's rearmed missiles at Lee. The two projectiles went sailing past Lee as the cylinders broke in midair and unleashed the senbon that were hidden inside. Neji, seeing that the needles were about to fall on his teammate, appeared by Lee's side and grabbed him by the shoulder before vanishing in sight and reappearing beside Tenten, who held the naginata high. I have deduced all of the weapon systems that this puppet has by now. Neji proclaimed. His two teammates turned to look at him and Neji nodded. Neji then pointed to the puppet. This puppet not only houses the puppeteer, but it also has a system that activates a self-repairing mechanism inside it, connecting to the different points of the puppet itself. The hood that is attached to the main body of the puppet is thicker than most parts, suggesting that it gives a more reinforced form of defense. I had intended to strike that target with my ratio, lightning palm, but that hide is composed of metal that absorbs chakra and uses it to its own, like how that chakra armor that Team 7 had seen from Yuki no Kuni. This tells me that we have two options to stop him and render him useless. As Sasori began repairing his favorite puppet anew, the puppeteer watched closely. He had underestimated these three. He would do well not to do so now, especially with the Hyuga that has seen him operate Hiroko inside. The first option is to destroy that puppet completely faster than he could repair. It is a tedious process, but with the way he acts around his puppet, this tells me that he either favors his use of this puppet alone or he has another thing up his sleeve that he refuses to use. The second option is to topple it over and expose the less protected underbelly. As far as I see, Sasori's puppet has already shown all its armaments and features. Its main weapon is its tail. I saw a flow of liquid from it, with the tip hollow as it is like a syringe needle. It's safe to assume that it is its main way to deliver poison. I have seen enough of this puppet to tell how this person works. Sasori was impressed. This boy had managed to do his work. Sasori now knew his puppet Hiroko was compromised. It was only a matter of time for this team to break through his defenses. So, before any of that were to happen, Sasori would make sure to pull out all the stops for his favorite puppet. Outside the cave, Deidara had burst through the cloud of smoke from the cave, standing on one of his creations as it flew outside. The Akatsuki member looks back, smirking as he did so. Not many shinobi knew the ability of flight. Few actually did so. Perhaps in the once chaotic times of the warring clans era, they might have had them, but it was just as recently as the first establishment of the villages and the first Shinobi World War where formal records were started. As villages began to get organized, so too were the records of keeping list of all the abilities, jutsu and skills that famous shinobi throughout its formal history were started. So Deidara was in for a shock, when the Kyuubi Jinchuriki had burst from the smoke, riding what seems to be an ornately designed board, rushing at him as the winds howled in fury at the mad bomber. No, he was not going to be taken by surprise again. Deidara knew what he had to do. He had to forego the much slower creation he had made in favor of something more agile and faster than what he could do with this bird. Deidara immediately grabbed the Ikibi Jinchuriki that was held on by its tail feathers and jumped just in time as he saw the blonde shinobi had burst through his clay bird as it was severed in two, cleanly from what he could tell as he and his target were free-falling into the air. Deidara grabbed one of his more prized clay sculptures from his bag and with a single hand sign, activated the small statue and was soon enveloped in a large cloud of smoke. Deidara landed on his feet on the creature and stared up as he plopped his target down beside him and stared up. The clay bird beneath him looked much sharper than the last. It looked like it was built for high speed in the air, and with a mere flap of its much narrower-edged wings, Deidara cleared through the smoke and flew much faster than his first clay bird creation. I never thought I'd use the peregrine falcon design ever. This was supposed to be used against that old fogey, Onoki. The falcon flapped its wings once more and another boost of speed was seen as Deidara flew up with the cage in tow, slip streams of wind escaping at the edges of its wings. Naruto, now in midair, piercing through the clouds and out of his clone's transferring chakra seal, twisted in midair and held the board by its side with his right arm, temporarily disconnecting his chakra from the seal to adjust his bearings. Eyes turning blue once more, Naruto looked down and saw Deidara deploying another bird from his arsenal and this time, flew much faster than before. Growling in annoyance, Naruto connected his chakra to the seals on his board once again and flew down in a curve arc as he began to give chase. Deidara then looked back once more, the visor in his left eye adjusted and zoomed in on the blonde. Deidara was able to notice the change in the blonde's eyes and smirked. So the color of his eyes changes in relation to his abilities. That means whatever tanked my spider bombs earlier would be much less durable now. To test this theory, Deidara grinned and unleashed a batch of pellet-like substances that soon turned into several four-winged birds that he used to sick at Naruto. Seeing the small claybirds made their way to him, Naruto opted to dodge them by making a sharp right turn and then a nosedive as the claybirds gave chase. Deidara then began to observe his pursuer in this case. Pretty good maneuverability with the speed to match, not to mention he doesn't require as much startup in getting into the air with that burst of wind. But I was right that he can't tank my bombs like he did earlier. Is this a special ability of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki? It was not surprising. Each Biju had a predominance over one element or attribute. The Ikibi could manipulate sand and imbue cursed seals. It would be no surprise that the Jinchuriki could have an ability that was distinct from the rest. Bursts of explosions then escaped the forest floor and Deidara kept watch. His peregrine falcon sculpture kept hovering over the forest as Naruto zigzagged along the treetops avoiding the fast-moving clay birds. Several explosions occurred in different places all at once. Naruto managed to avoid them all still, weaving through tree trunks and making sharp turns and corners through very difficult avenues of space that was afforded to him. Deidara watched silently as he held up a hand close to his chest to a seal. The blonde's movements through the trees reminded him of hawks, fast, agile and maneuverable creatures in the air that could navigate through difficult terrain. They were not as fast as falcons or as powerful as eagles, but they certainly have enough traits that make them dangerous raptors in air and weave through trees for their prey. His observation of the avian species had helped him a great deal in his creations. He had first thought that the gift of flight was as good as it gets, but the more time he observed birds, the more he came to appreciate the intricacies of them. More explosions on the forest floor, more of his creations went after the blonde, and more will come as Deidara created them en masse. A shadow then loomed above Deidara, forcing the mad bomber to look up only to find the Kyuubi Jinchuriki above him, staring downwards at Deidara with a middle index cross-hand seal that soon covered Deidara's skies in clouds of white smoke. How the hell did he get above me? Soon, hundreds of Naruto's clones appeared above, around and below him, intent of swallowing him whole. In the midst of this impressive feat, the prone form of the Kage's right index finger twitched. Deidara's eyes turned into pinpricks. An army of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki that could fly, change attributes and do destructive jutsu like no one's business. The Kage may have been a formidable opponent. But this one was just as dangerous. Bunshin Debakua. Boom. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video, as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.